Continuing on the Take Command podcast, time to welcome in today's guest, ESPN NFL draft analyst Matt Miller. Matt, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be on with you guys. Unfortunately, it's draft season already for Commanders fans, but it's good news for people in my line of work, right? You know, that we it's early to mid-December, we're getting called up. I'll tell you, when I was at Bleacher Report for a decade, and it'd always be funny in those editorial meetings. Every week I'd pop in like to the Zoom call and I'd be like, okay, are Browns fans talking about the draft yet? You know, so it's like, it's not Browns fans anymore, but it's like, I always knew like, okay, you know, it's like week 10, Browns fans are talking about the draft. It's time to call Matt into the lineup. So it's a good time of year for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a good time for year for us because getting you on is, I'm sure, much easier now than it will be in like February and March. So we'll take the exclusivity as everyone else cares about, you know, the playoffs. So Logan asked me a question to start the podcast that I thought was actually very interesting, and I don't know in terms of your background and how you kind of approach what you do on the media side of this, the answer to it. But he asked, you know, hey, does Matt do more scouting or more talent evaluation? Talent evaluation being like, hey, what's on tape? Scouting being all of the other stuff that goes into a player profile. So how do you approach the job, and how does that change from now at the end of college football season until the NFL draft?
No, that's such a great question. And I almost wish there was you could have like a resume on social media that says like, hey, here's how I do things, because that really like leads to a bigger jumping off point even of like, how do you do a mock draft? Is it what you would do, or is it what you think teams will do? And so it's just this like philosophical question that we could spend hours talking about. So short answer, both. And I came up in this industry. I always wanted to be a scout. I wanted to work for a team and scout players, you know, and I think that's why journalism always appealed to me, because you're trying to find out the truth about a player. And so I still approach the job the same way of, you know, I'm going to watch every game that I possibly can, understanding that there are about 700 players that we have to be aware of, right? I'm not going to lie to you guys and pretend like I've watched 12 games on Duke's right guard. No, I haven't, you know, but, you know, quarterbacks, especially, you watch every game. And then for everyone else, you prioritize the best you can, understanding that you're a one-person scouting department. So try to watch as much as I can. But, you know, I've been in this business 13 years. And so I've seen it change. And one thing that has helped me over those 13 years is that I do now have, you know, connections with different teams, whether it be area scouts, director, player personnel, general managers, you know, college coaches, where you can say, hey, help me narrow this list down, because it's impossible to watch everyone. One of the greatest things that has happened in my career is going to ESPN, where there's a system of, if I want to watch every throw Caleb Williams has made in the red zone, I can click a couple buttons and have those ready. You know, before that, it was, God, how am I going to watch all these guys? So just having access to better technology, and you know, the NCAA is very protective about their game film. So even just having access to that is huge. So I try to do both. You talk to scouts, talk to coaches, find out what's going on behind the scenes, so that can better inform me, you know, based on what I've seen from the players.
And then, like, to Craig's question, like, how does that change over the next couple of months, really? You know what I'm saying? Because, like, I feel like there's always this, like, there's the end of season kind of mock draft formula where you kind of see the same 32 guys. Then all of a sudden, Daniel Jeremiah will put his out. You know, he's pretty dialed in. And there's 5 or 6 names on there. You're like, who the heck are these guys? Because he's been talking and he's been kind of doing that scouting process. How does that change for you over the next couple of months?
Yeah, so I actually just put my first mock draft out this week. And I like to think I had some names in there that the general draft fan maybe wasn't familiar with, like Tyrion Arnold from Alabama is my number 1 corner. I try not to absorb a lot of draft content, because I love Daniel Jeremiah. I love Mel Kiper Jr., but I don't want their rankings getting in my head. So I try not to look at those things and just have, you know, hey, here's who I think are the guys. So like Tyrion Arnold, my number 1 corner, Enos Rakestraw from Missouri, my number 2 corner. So like, that's just based on what I've seen and conversations I've had with scouts. You're right. January, when we all get to the Senior Bowl, everything is going to get blown up, because you start having more of those in-person conversations. I was on the phone with the general manager 2 nights ago, and he was driving to have dinner with all his scouts. You know, he's like, oh, all our scouts are in. let me run some names by you, because he's an NFL general manager and he's getting caught up because he's got his own to do during the season, right? And so it's like, it's so much easier to do a deep dive after January 13th because the deadline for underclassmen has passed. So we're not worried about Shedeur Sanders and Carson Beck anymore. They're going back to school. Let me focus on Jaden Daniels and JJ McCarthy. So you're able to cut your list. You're able to see, okay, who's going to the Shrine Bowl, who's going to the Senior Bowl, peek behind the curtain. I prioritize those guys because, if you don't get a Shrine invite or a Senior Bowl invite, the chances of you being drafted are really slim. And, that is one area my job has changed a lot. With the TV side of things, day 3 of the draft, I'm going to spend so much time studying those players. And so if you don't make the Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, Combine, like if you don't get an invite to one of those 3 things, the chance that I'm going to do a deep dive on you is pretty small unless someone vouches for you. So that's another part of it, Logan. Like you start to just cut your list, and those events help. So it's not even just, it's like, oh man, like DJ put out his top 32. Let me go look at that. I mean, it's more of like scouts start talking and you're like, wait, why didn't I have Xavier Watts from Notre Dame higher?
Right.
Players like that. So it's more conversations like that happening.
Interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned you just put out your first mock. I'm guessing you did this before Monday Night Football and never expected the Giants to win because they wound up in that 4th pick in your mock. And then all of a sudden everyone wakes up the next morning. It's like, wait, they won. They should be 5th, which I only bring up not to be like, hey, what happened there? But because I think it becomes a very interesting question. If Jaden Daniels, who for you is quarterback 3, is available at 4 for Washington, which based off that Monday night result is where they would pick. So when you look at what Sam Howell has been as a pro so far, and if you're that GM making the decision, whoever that will ultimately be for Washington, assuming they have massive changes that we all expect, like how many quarterbacks would you be considering and really wanting to look at as this guy could be better than what I think Sam Howell can be better than, which is kind of asking you 2 questions in one, your top quarterbacks and also what you think of
I was
Sam.
about to say, man, that's not a fair question because, he's doing his draft stuff, and now you're like, I got to do the eval on Sam Howell too. So, mock drafts suck, by the way. So good for you. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so I love mock drafts, though. That's my favorite part of the job, honestly.
Seriously? You're a psycho.
Yeah, but I love doing those. So, Craig, I was not the biggest Sam Howell guy. I had a 3rd round grade on him. Commanders fans got pissed because someone found like my eval of like my comp for him coming out of college was Colt McCoy, which to me was a compliment. Colt was a damn good college quarterback. He just had a shoulder injury that ruined his arm, but he played in the NFL for like 14 years. So it wasn't the knock that people wanted it to be. So I was not, I had a 3rd round grade on Sam Howell. I think he's played above my expectations this year to the point that you have to do that linear evaluation. Okay, Caleb Williams, let's evaluate Sam Howell versus where we think Caleb can be. Also with the understanding Sam's 2 years into a 4-year deal. So you have to think about, we're going to have to pay this guy if he's the guy. Same with Drake May, same with Jaden Daniels, same with JJ McCarthy. My philosophy this year, whether they're in the 4th, 5th slot, somewhere right there, is if it's not Caleb Williams, you build around Sam Howell. Like Caleb's the only guy that I would say, let's see what we can get for Sam Howell. Let's call New England. Let's call Atlanta. Let's see, what kind of draft capital can we get? And, I think the other thing that you have to do, so I would start end of the year. You got a new general manager, new head coach. The first thing I'm doing is calling Ryan Poles, the general manager in Chicago, and saying, do you believe in Justin Fields? Is Justin Fields in 3 first-round picks? Do you believe in that more than you believe in Caleb Williams? Because if so, we'll give you the Bryce Young package. We'll come up to 1 and draft Caleb Williams. I think, why not call him? He traded out of it last year. Why not call and say, hey, Justin Fields looked pretty good since that thumb injury. What if we give you?
So just real quick, you like Fields more than Howell, like by that much?
No, not by that. No, what I'm saying is, like, if you're Chicago, can you talk Chicago into keeping Justin Fields with 3 more with you giving the draft picks? I like Justin as a runner more than Sam Howell. I think Howell has been better as a passer. And so it's just like, it goes to that, like, how do you want to build your team? And I think for Chicago and Washington, those are huge questions. So, no, I wouldn't kick Sam Howell to the curb for Drake May. I just wouldn't. Same for, I love Jaden Daniels. I'm a huge Jaden Daniels fan. That conversation might be a little more interesting because I I think, Drake's 20 years old. JJ McCarthy's 21 years old. These guys, I don't know that they're ready to step in and be CJ Stroud, so there's going to be a developmental period where it does go to would we rather have Marvin Harrison Jr. with Sam Howell? Would we rather have Olu Fashanu or Joe Alt with Sam Howell? How much better can Sam look? And, that's really one of those things, like, unless you're in that building, seeing his work ethic and practice habits and film study, like, it would be disingenuous for me to sit here having watched, 12 Commanders games and say, no, like, Sam Howell's not the guy, or yeah, Sam Howell's the guy, because I think so much of it is going to be what's happening behind closed doors that can make you believe he can continue to get better.
Yeah, and so one of the things you said there that I thought was interesting, it's like, if you were to tier, let's say your top 15 guys, like, who's tier one? Because everyone does these linear drafts, and it makes sense. Like, it's a linear big board. But, like, I don't think of the draft that way, because it's like, who are the best players? Are they in the same tier? And like, you kind of said something there about the quarterbacks, which I thought was interesting. Like, there was one guy that's kind of head and shoulders above everybody else. How do those other quarterbacks shake out in comparison to, like, a Marvin Harrison Jr. or the edge rusher from UCLA, or one of these top tier tackles, right? So can you kind of give us some insight on that?
Yeah, I think there's a clear top tier this year. I would say that's Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Olu Fashanu. Like, I feel comfortable saying those guys are in a group by themselves. Yeah, like, they're in most drafts, they would be the number one overall player. It's like, they're that good. Even like, if Caleb Williams had been in the draft last year, he would have gone first overall. And that's, we could say what we want about, did the Panthers make the right call with Bryce Young? He would have gone first overall. I think, the quarterbacks are always going to get inflated. Most drafts, Olu Fashanu would be a number one overall player. Marvin Harrison Jr. would be a number one overall player, even if they're not the first pick, because they understand quarterbacks go first. But they would be the top ranked player. I think after that, there's a drop off. After that, you get into Drake May, quarterback North Carolina. You get into Joe Alt, the left tackle from Notre Dame. I think that's where you see Leatu Latu, the DN from UCLA that you mentioned. Medicals are going to be huge for him, to where we could be talking about a top 10 pick, or we could be talking about a second round pick with him. Dallas Turner from Alabama, pass rusher, is right in that group as well, I would say. Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia. You got 3 wide receivers I would put in there: Keon Coleman, Florida State; Malik Neighbors, LSU; and Roma Dunze from Washington. And then after that, you get to another tier after that. So, like, guys that I will have a true first round grade on, it's probably like 11 or 12 this year. I think in a quote unquote normal year, you're probably going to have 15, 16. So in terms of, like, true blue chip talent, and I should have mentioned, I would put Jaden Daniels right in that group too, probably at the tail end of it. True first round grades, those are the guys I would put in there. In
that tier 2 group, you're saying, with Jaden Daniels?
Yeah.
So
I'm a Jaden Daniels fan, guys.
It's interesting.
We'll see what happens with whomever gets hired there, and what the offense looks like. But no player improved more in college football this year than Jaden Daniels, and I love to see that from quarterbacks. Like, 2022, he was good, but he wasn't this. And you see the work he put in, and then you're like, damn, that dude took off. And it's not like artificial. You got better at certain skill sets that are obvious to see on film, and that's where you get pretty excited.
So let me ask you that kind of follow up to go deeper on that, though, because I feel like sometimes that's a little scary. Is like, what actually happens is a guy figures out college football, and it's like, oh, is he ever going to be able to make the next step and figure out the NFL? So how do you try to differentiate a guy who figured out college football versus a guy that made a huge, significant leap like Jaden Daniels did that can carry that kind of improvement into the league?
What helps is when you play in the SEC West. So if you're at LSU, like, come on, you're not playing. It's not at Colorado, like, you're playing the best of the best in the SEC week in and week out. And we were talking about corners earlier, Tyrion Arnold, Enos Rakestraw, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Kamari Lassiter. There are just 4 corners right there from the SEC. They're going to be first round picks. So, like, you're seeing the best talent. And so I think you always have that worry. Hey, this guy's 22. He's playing against 19-year-olds. Did it just click for him because he's physically at his peak, or is it because he's been in college for 4 years and it clicked? Those are all questions that you have to answer. And I think what helps me with Jaden Daniels specifically is I've talked to coaches at LSU that say, no, what clicked was the work ethic. He started to understand what he had to do to be great. And he was in here every day working his ass off. He gained like 15 pounds of muscle because he knew he needed to get better there. I can watch his 2022 tape and see him dropping his eyes and running around like crazy when he gets pressured. I watch him in 2023, eyes are downfield. He gets pressured. He understands he has numbers, and he's layering it over the top to two really good receivers and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr.
I was about to say, man, he's got some good receivers too.
He's got some dudes. Yeah. I always say, like, so did Joe Burrow. So did CJ Stroud. It's like, and I think last year someone asked Hendon Hooker about that, and he said, "It's not my fault my receivers get open." And he's right. It's not. It's like you would be dumb not to throw to them because they're open. Yeah. So
do you hit them in timing and do you hit them accurately? Yeah.
And I think that's where, like, I love the analytics side of things. It helps me do my job, but there's no substitute to turning on the tape and seeing, man, I'm watching this guy make plays with his eyes and arm in the pocket that he never made before. And that's where, like, I get excited about his development.
Yeah, so you said something interesting earlier when you were talking about Caleb Williams and how you would potentially trade up for him. If one of those three guys that you mentioned aren't there when Washington, I guess, is picking at 4, is that right, Craig? 4?
Yeah, with where we are right now, they're picking 4th. Obviously, 4 games to go.
And obviously, how quarterbacks tend to go, and you seem very high on Sam Howell. Like, would you trade back out of that 4th pick if you make the decision to stay with Sam? And it does seem like that second tier is pretty meaty with some good football players in it, and you can get back out of there and still get a good football player.
I think trading back is certainly on the table, and I'm not trying to like hedge here at all. It really depends on what happens at 2-3. So let's say, just for fun, Chicago takes Caleb Williams, New England takes Drake May, the Arizona Cardinals take Marvin Harrison Jr. You're sitting at 4 with Olu Fashanu on the board. Just take him.
He's the first tier, right? Man. You got to take him.
Exactly, top tier. And I like Joe Alt as well, but the difference between those guys is significant enough for me that you don't risk it. You don't risk, hey, what if we move back? Especially where you have a division rival, the New York Giants, sitting at 5. Don't help them. Like, don't give them potentially a good player. So in that scenario, you take Fashanu and you feel great about it. And then round 2, you're like, hey, let's get some receivers in round 2. And this is a fun study. And you guys, if you get some downtime, do this. Look at the best left tackles in the NFL. Most of them were first-round picks.
Right.
Now, you want to look at the best wide receivers in the NFL? You got a laundry list of guys round 2, round 3. So, could you find, an A.J. Brown type talent, the top round 2, or Deebo Samuel? Hell yeah, it happens every year. So,
especially this year too, right?
Fashanu, right. I had 8 wide receivers going to my round 1 mock draft. That would be a record. And there were like 2 or 3 more guys I probably could have fit in there. So the wide receiver class is so deep. And I know fans, but Washington fans, you guys have a lot of needs. That's just where you're at. You're drafting 4. You obviously have some needs, but you can stack the board pretty well this year, I think. If you go tackle round 1, whether it's edge rusher or wide receiver in round 2, like there's good depth there.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to ask next is you actually have what I would consider potentially a small number of quarterbacks, only 4, I think, going, or 3, 4, 4 going in your first round, all of whom are going in the top 10, is you've got J.J. McCarthy from Michigan going very high. But Bo Nix is going to be in the mix. Michael Penix from Washington is going to be in the mix. There might be a couple of others by the time the process is over. And then you have Washington sitting at the top of the second round with their pick and the Bears pick. Who are some of the guys that like, how would you grade like the position Washington is in with those 2 picks at the top of the second round? Because you said there's maybe not as many guys with the first round grade this year, but is that next second tier deep enough at the right positions that it could be extremely beneficial to Washington?
Yeah, definitely. And, I'll go back to, this is a great class for wide receivers. It's a great class for offensive tackles. So, and especially, the right tackle position, I know Andrew Wiley's there. The jury, I think, is out on the job that he's done this year, but the draft is deep enough at those positions that you could be pretty excited. Corner is going to be deep in round 2. I know, last year getting Forbes in the first round, we're definitely going to see a new defensive system in there. So that will be interesting to see, how well Forbes fits with whatever comes in. But I think at those, what you would consider premium positions, there is that good depth. So top of round 2, probably not at quarterback is the one thing I'm going to say, because I do think those 4 guys are going to go fairly early. Bo Nix might even go late first round. I think we could see a team try to jump back up if you like Bo Nix. The guy started 60 games in college. So anything you want to see, you can see it on tape. SEC, Pac-12, he played at both. Really good at attacking outside the hashes, really good intermediate timing. He's athletic. I could see him having a strong enough pre-draft process that someone late first round tries to get back in, and to make him the guy. Especially because I think last time I counted, there were like 12 teams that could make a change at quarterback, and we're talking about 4 going in the first round. So Bo Nix and Michael Penix become pretty valuable in that scenario, especially where the free agent quarterbacks this year, Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehill. Like I don't know that anybody's beating down any doors to sign those guys, especially with Kirk coming off an injury. So it does get pretty interesting on how are you going to fill those quarterback needs with, again, another long conversation. NIL has changed quarterback in the draft. The days of guys, okay, hey, it's been 4 years, I'll enter the draft. That's gone. We got Tyler Show going 7 years in college at this point. And so that middle market of quarterbacks is Cam Ward, Washington State is transferring. He would be a guy that would normally be in the draft, and you would say, hey, that's a good mid-round quarterback. Now those guys aren't jumping in. And so it feels like we're going to get to this point where there's going to be round 1 quarterbacks, and then there's going to be late day 3 quarterbacks, and there might not be a whole lot in the middle.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about the offensive side of the ball here. In terms of defensive, like blue chippers, are there any? And do you think that, like, kind of, one of the positions that was really kind of rich last year was that edge rusher in that early second round? Are there going to be guys there that can play some football?
Yeah, so it's a light class defensively, especially in terms of blue chippers. I would say Turner at Alabama and Latu at UCLA have the potential to be there. Again, with Latu, medicals are going to be a huge part of that evaluation. I think particularly the edge rusher spot is interesting this year because you're going to have guys who are there early round 2. They're going to be values. It's just a matter of whether they're going to be a scheme fit. Like Chop Robinson at Penn State is fascinating to me because his production was through the roof. I think his pass rush win rate was like 20%. But he's listed at 255 pounds, and I don't believe that for a second. I think he's 240, 245 is what he looks like on the field. So that's just going to be a question of, hey, he's undersized, however you want to slice it, even if he puts on some weight throughout the process. So you're going to have guys like that, who are available potentially top of round 2. It's just, do you like the scheme fit? On the opposite end, Chris Braswell from Alabama, he's been overshadowed by Will Anderson Jr., overshadowed by Dallas Turner. He's just a really good player, plays with power, sets the edge well, has, that first step burst. He's probably going to be available early round 2, especially if you're running a defense where a guy has, really almost exclusively stood up in college. That could be something that's...
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Welcome into the Take Command pregame show. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. Logan back after the bye week.
Yeah.
You feel refreshed?
Yeah, very refreshed. Really excited to talk about this team.
That's nice for you. My schedule didn't change.
Yeah.
Except for I had jury duty.
How'd that go?
Honestly, it was terrible.
No?
I was literally the second to last person they didn't select. They skipped over me and came back, and they're like, you, sir, can go. Juror number 4, you can go to the gallery.
That's good, right?
Yeah, except for the heart attack that I had in between. But you
had a heart attack?
Not an actual heart attack.
What do you mean? Like
I didn't want to be on a jury.
I know, so they skipped you, and then
I was
back.
like, oh crap, they picked me. I'm going to be on a jury.
For the jury selection, what kind of questions did they ask you, or did you even get to that part?
Yeah, no, we had our voir dire questions, which I learned afterwards from my wife, who minored in Latin. That it's apparently Latin. Yeah, they asked about do you have any specific to the case, like, a couple of questions like, do you have any strong feelings about issues relevant to the case? Do you have any lawyers in your family?
Yeah, you always say yes to those questions.
Well, it's easy because I do have lawyers in my family.
Yeah, so just say yes.
Next time I'm going to be stronger with it. It's like, do you have any strong opinions on lawyers? Like, yes, my wife works in legal marketing, and they make her life hell. I hate them. All right, sir, you're free to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, apropos of none of that, it is a game week here on the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fan, a burgundy and gold game day. Rams and Commanders play 4:05 in L.A., we'll have our eye on the rest of the games, obviously, which is very easy because they are all on in front of us here at Tap Sports Bar. But, Logan, I want to start actually with a game that already happened this week, and with some news that came down and where that puts us going into the offseason. And it's actually the other LA team, which got their doors absolutely blown off on Thursday.
Wild game.
Gave up 42 points in the first half, 63 overall to a team, by the way, who got shut out by the Minnesota Vikings 5 days prior in the Las Vegas Raiders. The Chargers doing that cost Brandon Staley his job. And it seems to be, to me, what is a very lazy consensus, that is the best job on the market this offseason. Now, of course, we all expect changes here in Washington, and I actually, depending on what I was looking for as a coach, would like the Washington job better than the LA job, and I know that sounds crazy because they have Justin Herbert, and Herbert's awesome. But without me explaining my why here to you and the audience, how do you rank some of the jobs you think that are going to be available? We expect Chicago could become available, although they're 5-8 and are playing better. But Chicago, the Chargers, Washington, New England, anybody else that Vegas obviously has an opening already. What do you make of these jobs, and what do you think these coaches are going to look for?
Yeah, I mean, if I was a head coaching candidate, and it's always fun to put that hat on, I'd probably think the Chicago job would be the best one, in my opinion. They got a ton of cap space. I think their roster's not great, but it's not bad. The offensive line's playing better. They've got some good skill position guys. Their running game's strong. In terms of running back personnel, I think defensively they've got some distance to cover, but
since Sweat got there, they're a top 5 defense.
Yeah, they've been playing much, much better. So I think that's the job, considering you also, in addition to cap space, have 2 top 10 picks, in a draft that's got some blue chippers, like we talked to Matt Miller about a couple days ago on the podcast. So I think that's something that job definitively screams like this is, if you're a head coach and you're trying to establish your culture and your program, you have the opportunity to add a starting quarterback, probably Caleb Williams, and then a difference maker in terms of offensive line or receiver. And I think that those are the things that I want to do, and I want to make sure that we're creating good offense. We've got defensive personnel in place, and I think that just feels like the right position. And then I think I'd probably go LA over here. And again, like, this is not really understanding the total leadership or the ownership dynamic there. I've heard a couple different testimonies about leadership there, ownership specifically, how supportive they are of the team and stuff. So obviously, if I had more insight on that, I could give you a better kind of critique. Because if it's not, if it is not as supportive as people have seemed to indicate, then I don't want the job.
Well, that's the thing. The Spanos family that owns the Chargers has had a very mixed bag of reviews over the years. Obviously, one of their most significant move in the history of the franchise is to the fact that they moved it from San Diego to L.A., and depending on whether you're in San Diego, L.A., the league office, wherever, that colors how you view the family. But they definitely don't have the best ownership. And I think that the rosters, it's not that it's like they have a better roster currently than what is here. They are the most disappointing team to me in the NFL this season. But moving forward, it is an older roster that is very expensive. They do have some levels of flexibility. But for me, what I would value is great ownership and resources. Because inherently, if you're taking a job, you just came off of a not good season. Nobody gets fired after a good year. And so I want the ability to change stuff. And with, that's why Chicago's interesting, although I think the ownership situation here is better than it is in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that.
I mean,
it's still the, that established family.
Yeah, McCaskey family, and the matriarch of that family is like 100 years old. And so, time being what it is, you'd imagine there's whatever the succession plan is in place. You'd want to understand that. Well, God, imagine having to ask that in an interview. So what's the succession plan when your grandmother? Never mind. We're just not going to finish the sentence. But the point is, like, if I'm looking for stability in ownership, like intelligence in ownership, flexibility, yes, Chicago has the top overall pick in this draft, very likely from Carolina. Their draft capital's better. Their cap situation's basically the same. And then I think it just comes down to that ownership part of it, and that's where I might lean Washington. But you do have a hard time saying, like, oh, no, for all the same reasons that I'd like Washington over maybe L.A., that you wouldn't like Chicago slightly better than Washington, unless you have some fondness for this area or some dislike of extremely cold, windy cities.
Yeah, and I do think that I don't know. I still think you can't overstate how important Justin Herbert is to a coach. So I do think, like, to your point, this job here is very, very appetizing. I think having a new owner or a stable ownership situation, that's so, so important. I think you do have a lot of resources. You have a lot of draft resources. You have a lot of money. And I think all those things are very, very important. And, you know, people say, oh, the facilities this. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Facilities are going to get rebuilt in the next couple of years. And honestly, if I'm a coach and I want the chance to shape something, like, I'm going to have a big say in what those facilities look like.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't really bother me as a coach. The facility here, like, I've been on 5 different teams in the NFL,
including Washington and Chicago.
Yes, and the facilities, while a factor, are not the only factor in my decision. Like, the other things that I just listed, if I'm trying to be a head coach, even if I'm a player, like, I think people overvalue how important facilities are to players. It is nice to have certain amenities. It's not the only thing, and I think that that's something people often get super caught up in for whatever reason. But I do think this is a really good job. You know, some of the other jobs on that article that we were kind of referencing are like Atlanta, which I think is a great job. If it does come open, the Jets, which I think I'm less like warm on that because I think the ownership there is a little bit dicey in my opinion.
Ownership's not been historically great.
And so obviously, like, for us, even just like in this casual conversation, I do think that the ownership is a huge element, and I think the ownership situation here is going to be incredibly stable. I think how Josh Harris has handled the Ron Rivera situation is a testament to him, and if I'm a coach coming in, I'm like, he's going to do what he says. So if he says, if I say I got a 3-year plan and he's okay with that, I know I'm going to get 3 years. It's not going to be like the guy in Carolina who's like, oh, it's been 10 weeks.
We'll give Matt Rule a 6-year contract and fire him after 2.
Yeah, and I just think that's not what I want. I want a guy who's going to let me kind of get my vision, build a culture, all those types of things. And one of the criticisms of this location is that you got to rebuild your culture in Washington. I hate to break it to you. If you're firing your head coach, you got to be rebuild the culture everywhere. Like, you think the culture in LA is great? No. Right. Do you think the culture in Chicago is great right now? No. Like, you wouldn't be talking about moving on from your head coach if it was like a super dynamic culture that was like breeding a winner. Like, that's why we're having this conversation in terms of jobs coming open.
I think, you know, if you're a Commanders fan, you want to root hard for Chicago down the stretch. One, you don't want them to be in this coaching search. And if Eberflus can go to his owner and be like, look, we got a little bit more talent influx in Montez Sweat on defense, and we played as a top 5 unit. That's my bread and butter. I promise we'll work on the offensive side, and we're going to hire someone to work with Caleb Williams, and we're going to take him, or, you know, we'll trade Justin Fields. Like, there's so much they can do to fix that. But then also, obviously, you're competing for them head-to-head. Record-wise, you finished worse. You get the higher pick. Yeah. And the beauty of it for Chicago is they just got to have Carolina keep Carolinaing. And they're going to get the number 1 pick via the trade from last year. So if those things are relatively equal, there is one other factor here, and this is where I think Josh Harris is a huge factor. Josh Harris will pay. Yeah. And this is something where, like, Carolina is going to be able to overcome some of their nonsense because David Tepper will sign a gigantic check.
Right.
And so, to me, like, that's going to be the final straw is if a Ben Johnson or whoever the top candidate is trying to decide between Chicago and Washington, and he really likes Sam Howell and thinks like, hey, there's a way to build around Sam. That's great. You know, Williams is intriguing. I don't know. Hey, I'm going to offer you $7 million a year. Chicago's going to offer $5 million. Well, then I'm probably going to Washington. Yeah. So that's always one of the things you learn very early in a journalism career is follow the money. Yeah. So for all these other factors, I think those factors get you in the door. What gets you to be able to close the door behind you with the coach that you want in the room is your paycheck, and certainly Josh Harris is someone who I think is going to be willing to pay. So something to keep in mind over these next couple of weeks. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, the GM pairing becomes very important as well. We'll be following all that, not only here on the radio, but on the Take Command podcast, which you can subscribe to and comes to your feeds 3 times per week. This is, however, allegedly a pregame show, so we will talk about the game as we move forward. Kevin Sheehan joins us, as always, 30 minutes into the show, about 18 minutes from now. And next, we will start taking a look at the matchup. Rams and Commanders coming up just after 4 o'clock. It is the Take Command pregame show here on 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980, YouTube for both stations as well. It is a burgundy and gold game day. from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor with Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman. By the way, Logan, I was here yesterday.
Were you really?
Yeah.
For fun?
So, yeah, Cirque du Soleil's holiday special is at the theater here at MGM.
Dude, Cirque du Soleil, I mean, like, we're trainers.
Yeah.
Those athletes are just tremendous.
It's crazy.
It's tremendous.
We were talking yesterday. We were here with a couple other our friends from the fitness world, and we're all just like, if someone's like, hey, could you train me for Cirque du Soleil? I'd be like, no, I don't know how they do that stuff. Like, I think you're born like that in some capacity, and then you work really hard, and then you're in Cirque du Soleil, and then you're floating above all of us.
I mean, it just shows you, like, how important, like, genetics are for, like, athletic qualities, you know?
Insane.
Like the arm levers, all that kind of, or the limb levers, all that kind of stuff is just unbelievable.
I do believe the show is wrapping up, so not many more chances to see it, but we'll recommend. My personal recommendation.
What was the theme of it?
Not a paid endorsement, but Holidays. is the show. DAZE at the end of that. Holidays special here at MGM National Harbor at the theater from Cirque du Soleil. Very cool. I have to go. Going out to Vegas for the Super Bowl. I have to go see a Cirque show out there.
Just trying to hit them all. Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Look at you, man.
Yeah.
Just living your best life.
Got the tickets and everything. So we'll take the radio show out there. It'll be a good time. So look forward to that. Probably, if I'm being honest, much more than I am 4 o'clock today. But alas, there is a game to get ready for. Rams and Commanders. And number one item on the to-do list when you face LA is the same as it's been for the better part of a decade. How do you protect Sam Howell today from Aaron Donald, which is an easy question to ask and a difficult one to answer?
Yeah, and I think the thing, like, I was listening to John Keim's podcast. He does this, like, 5 things on Friday.
Yeah.
And it's really just like, what is he watching? And I'm a little bit more technical than John. He's thinking more big picture, ownership, all this kind of stuff. And for me, it's like really like, what is the solution for Aaron Donald, like you said? And it's not so much like, if you watch the Baltimore game, Baltimore was like, we are not going to let you beat us. We're going to send the slide to you. We're going to make sure there's backs helping out. Backs usually chip and help the tackle. They've got the back chipping through the B gap to make sure Aaron Donald doesn't get an edge on the guard. Like, it was just such a point of emphasis. They've got tight ends in. They're changing their protection surfaces. It was very nuanced and just a great job by them. And if there's one criticism I could levy against EB over the course of this year is that he's been very deliberate about staying in 5-man pros. And if you look at the analytics, 5-man protections are great because you get more eligibles out of the route concept. You can distribute it better. And they've done some stuff, like they've layered that with like chip help and, different variations of those types of protections, which is awesome. But in this game, I'm kind of like, man, with all of the trouble that this team has been having with simulated 4-man pressures and how easy it is with Aaron Donald to create those, I really think you just got to see a really nice protection plan this week. That's something I have to see. They don't blitz a ton, but if I'm Raheem Morris, I look at this team and I say, shoot, if we can dictate the slide, which with Aaron Donald is going to be super easy, we're just going to run a guy directly through the A gap or the B gap, depending on how they distribute it, and there's going to be no one there to block him every single time. So that's something that I'm like, I really want to see that level of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of thought and prioritizing this element and saying, instead of just sticking with like what we've been good at and what we've been comfortable with over the last couple of weeks,
comfortable and good at are two different things.
But you know what I'm saying? Like the comfort, like, because prior to the last 2 weeks, right? They were doing what this offense does. They were in a lot of 5-man pros and it looked really good. And everyone's like, Sam Howell's the guy. And obviously against better teams, didn't work as well. Can you kind of, coming off the bye, say, these are things that have been giving us problems. We're not going to let LA do them to us. And given Aaron Donald, it would be especially easy for them to do those things because of how you have to handle him from a protection standpoint.
Right. So the now deeper question is, what does that actually look like? Are we talking about consistent 6-man protections with tight ends being kept in? Are you talking about chip help creatively like Baltimore did? Is it not necessarily sending the slide to Aaron Donald and doing something else to protect where you don't have 2 offensive linemen, like becoming less predictable in how you're going to pick up? And how do you implement that when you haven't really done it all season?
Well, for me, they have it in the bag. They have the installs. I think you look at that first New York game where they have 7-man pros. They have a lot of 6-man protections. They didn't execute them very well, but in the second matchup, I thought they executed them better in large part. So to me, it's just being a coordinator. I think one of the things is, can you help your players not by not letting the opposing players get in a rhythm?
Yeah.
Right? So if Aaron Donald says every 3rd and 5, they're in a 5-man pro and they're sending the slide to me, A, that helps the defensive play caller. B, that helps Aaron Donald. And I don't want to help Aaron Donald out at all.
Doesn't need it.
So can we say, oh, well, sometimes in 3rd and 5, we're in a 5-man pro, we're in a 6-man pro, we're running a sprint out, we're running quick game, where we're not giving them any kind of consistent key on what we're doing. And I feel like when you look at the Miami game, there were times, from a protection standpoint, where you're like, they know what's coming. Can we fix this? Can we solve this problem? Because I think, we'll talk about this more in a second, but one of the things about LA's defense is they bust coverages a ton. They've got a very young secondary. There is space back there. So if you can handle the protection element, I do think Sam Howell will look awesome in this game. I think you'll see a Sam Howell that looks like the guy against Philly, looks like the guy against New England, looks like him in the 4th quarter of the Seattle game. I think you'll see that today. But one big thing that needs to be understood is how do we handle this protection package, and then how do I call a game as an offensive coordinator to, again, make sure we're not falling into familiar patterns.
Right. So, God, there's so much there. I think that there's a couple things that are concerning, obviously, with that. Your personnel inside, Chris Paul and Sadiq Charles are going to be a rotation this week.
Draw that position is going to draw the majority of that matchup.
Right, and so talk about not getting a rhythm. Your O lineman not going to get in a rhythm either because they're going to be rotating this week. Yeah. Sadiq Charles back healthy. Ron said, we want to get him some time, but we don't want him to have the whole game on his plate. And Chris Paul's played well enough to earn some reps as well. So that's going to be an interesting thing to go how they watch. I think, or to watch how they rotate. Another thing that I think is interesting is I wish I had pulled the numbers more specifically or could recall them more specifically, but I saw some stuff this week about Sam Howell with play action, and he's just not very good in it this year, where he has not been as like a lot of quarterbacks. You see kind of, okay, here's where they are, EPA per play or whatever metric you want to use. In regular drop back, it takes a nice jump for play action. He doesn't have that jump.
Sure.
He's the same and at times worse, I think, depending on the situation. And so when you talk about moving the pocket, that's something that he's done very well with, some of these rolls and half rolls and things like that. Yeah. It's also a good way to, can you half roll, set up, throw a big play back across the formation. You haven't hit one of those, but there's been a couple of opportunities that have been close where Sam's either got to throw them or protection's got to hold up or whatever. But I think that there's like this delicate balance of making sure that you keep your players comfortable, obviously, in the stuff that they're familiar with, while also realizing that the last 2 weeks, the stuff that you're familiar with, the stuff that you've been trying to do hasn't worked against Dallas, hasn't worked against Miami, and you're going to have to get more creative, or not even creative, you're going to have to do something different in order to find some success.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the play action thing there, so let's double click on that. I do think that when you watch this offense, when you watch Kansas City's offense, they're not like a hard play action team. And what I mean by that is when you watch Tennessee, when you watch Atlanta, when you watch San Francisco, Detroit, it's like you feel the run differently. Everything's coming very downhill, the quarterback's under center. Anything from off gun from a play action standpoint to me is very
shouldn't even count in the stats.
Is very muted because the whole. So one of the benefits of play action is you're hiding the football. You're turning your back to the defense. You're hiding the ball. They don't see the ball. Even that provides a certain level of hesitation. And, we were talking about Miami a couple weeks ago, and from the gun, they would actually have the quarterback turn around for their gun fakes in play action, just to give a little bit of that indecision. And so what you see when you get that is when the back is to the defense, the linebackers don't move. Here, when the ball action happens in front, so Kansas City does it, Jacksonville does a little bit of this, right? Ball fake in front, they'll start dropping while the ball is still in the pocket. So all of that draw that you're trying to cultivate with the guy stepping up and stepping towards the line of scrimmage, does it work? Yes, but in terms of overall effectiveness, it's definitely not as effective as some of the other teams that are much more aggressive play action. So I think like when you watch, obviously there was a period of time where Alex Armo was up every single week.
Yeah,
and those play actions,
the hamstring injuries really.
Yeah, those play actions were much more effective because you get a fullback drawn up. Guys have to step up with the action. You can feel it more, and this team has not done that well. And so I think why my question to an offensive coordinator would be like, why even bother with the play action if we're just going to have the tight ends chip, get to the flats, and work those route combinations? Because you're still creating space, because you're creating time. And that time allows the offensive players to push in the defense. And I think that's where they've been a little bit more successful with the pure drop back stuff because the action that they're consistently running just isn't having the effect on the defense, at least to my eye, that leads to those those play action pass benefits.
Right, which often are big plays, something the Commanders have struggled with in terms of the huge play. They actually have had a nice number of explosives by definition, but kind of what I would call mid-range explosives. Yeah. They haven't had the big touchdown bombs really at all this season. All right, that's Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman here at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor, where every single game is on at least one TV. Come down, hang out, say hello to us in a commercial break, and enjoy the NFL action. We're getting ready for Commanders and Rams coming up at 4 o'clock. Kevin Sheehan joins us to discuss the game, and I want his opinion on where this job ranks amongst the potential openings this offseason. We'll talk about it with Sheehan next. Here it is, the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
Put your hands on somebody and kind of know what they like to do to shed and kind of get a feel for it. And so as you get to know them better and they get to know you, you kind of start playing that advanced like chess metric. And I think the familiarity breeds like a faster game quality, because like I know exactly what this defense is. I know exactly how they're going to play this run. We ran it against them, 6 weeks ago. Let's see it again. And we ran it against them last year twice. You know what I'm saying? So you get a really good feel for that. And obviously, like, the fans in the stadium are just a little bit more up. And so I definitely think the divisional thing is real. And you talk about it differently. You talk about divisional games in the week in a different way. So it's definitely something that's 100% real. And, in the context of the Giants, like, for whatever reason, they just have a good feel for this team. They have a good feel, good opportunity. Like, in our Take Fives, we talked about some Giant stories. Like I felt like during early in my playing career, I had a really good feel for what the Giants were doing. Like, I don't know what it was. When I went in that game, I just felt like I knew them really well. And sometimes when the Giants play the Commanders, it's like they just have a good knack and feel for kind of the holes and the wrinkles in the defense and ways to scheme stuff open. So I think divisional games are so fun. They're so fun to watch. They're so fun to play in. And I think they're fun to talk about because, like you said, even in this game where, we're going to talk about the Giants here in a second, Giants aren't a very good football team at the moment. Like, I don't know. And like Santana Moss is this is one of my favorite things he does. He's very consistent with his points of analysis. And anytime we're playing a divisional game, he's like, you can't count the other team out. And I think that's 100% accurate. And so whatever the record is, however bad the Giants have played, like, this team, the Commanders, need to come and like put their best foot forward and just say, like, we are the better football team, we're the better roster, and play like it. And I think ultimately that's what this game comes down to.
Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you and with us. Half an hour into the show, as he always is. It is our pleasure to welcome in Kevin Sheehan, host of the Kevin Sheehan Show. Weekdays on the Team 980. Kevin, how are you, sir?
What's up, boys? How you doing?
Doing well. Great to have you as always. So we started the show talking not about the game itself, but about what is coming, which is obviously some changes. And following the Chargers changes this week, there's a lot of talk about what's the best job available. How would you stack the Washington job up with the rest of the jobs that you expect to become available? LA, obviously, amongst them.
Higher than a lot of the lists that I've seen, that's for sure. I mean, I understand the Chargers and the Bears, the Bears having the opportunity with Carolina's first pick to potentially take a franchise-changing quarterback, not to mention their other picks. The Chargers with an established quarterback that, with some weapons when they're healthy, and some of the best facilities anywhere in the NFL. I understand those two. I don't understand any of the others. I guess New England could be interesting if it came available, if they've got the second pick or third pick in the draft. But I think Washington's high up there, and I think it's being talked in a much different way than it's ever been talked about before for obvious reasons. Dan's not there. And so the place is viewed as much less toxic than it's ever been. But, we've all talked about the same things. Top 2 or 3 salary cap availabilities space-wise, 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. Maybe if you decide Sam Howell is somebody you can build around, somebody that's already there at quarterback, on a still rookie deal. So I would put it, no worse than 3rd or 4th.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I sat as well with the ownership situation. Like, it's someone who we think is a very, very good owner, the kind you'd have to work for. Also, I think he'll pay people, which is very relevant when it comes down to breaking ties amongst other good jobs. But we'll see in terms of that. But, Logan, you want to keep going on this, or you want to actually
So
get to
the thing I wanted to ask him coming out of that conversation is, like, Kevin, one of the big pieces here is, like, can you build around Sam Howell? And I just wanted to get your thoughts on how you felt about him coming off of 2 games that weren't great, and, like, what does he need to do to kind of solidify him kind of being the guy for the next staff?
Man, I'm so glad you asked that, because we haven't talked about him at all this year. I'm still not, convinced.
Right.
But I'm still way ahead of maybe where I thought I would be, because I didn't really have expectations one way or the other. But I definitely believe there's been more to like than dislike. And that's encouraging. He can really throw it. We kind of knew that before. He can really play off schedule. We kind of knew that before. He's with, according to everybody, and Logan, more than anybody else, the intangibles are all there. He loves football. He works at it. People like him in the building. He's smart. Like, all of those things are there. What I still see with him, and maybe it's a function of the offense or the play calling, certainly the offensive line has something to do with it. I still see a guy that sometimes plays small in the pocket.
Interesting.
And he is a smaller quarterback. It doesn't always affect smaller quarterbacks, but I see a guy that sometimes doesn't see it as quickly as he needs to. Doesn't mean he won't get better in that area, won't process better, won't see it better, that a new system, new play calling, whatever, couldn't improve that. All of these things are still a work in progress. But I don't see how you couldn't, no matter what, you've got to evaluate all of the quarterbacks if you are picking in the top 4 or 5. Because if you think somebody's better than Sam long term, you got to take him. Because I don't know that I see greatness there. I don't know that I see elite, but I certainly wouldn't be opposed through 13 games if they didn't like any of the quarterbacks, or if they didn't love any of the quarterbacks that they had a chance to take, choosing to build around him and try that for another year or two. But I'm not convinced, at this point.
For whatever it's worth, Matt Miller, ESPN's NFL draft analyst, said on the podcast this week that Caleb Williams, at this point in his evaluations, is the only guy he'd take over, just continuing with Howell. So it's also going to, like you said, they're going to evaluate. They'll see who they think is better moving forward and go on from there. Kevin, how much stock do you put in today's game specifically? Because the final three defenses Howell is going to play are three of the best in the league. Jets, 49ers, Cowboys. This seems like the last best opportunity for Howell. So how do you weigh this performance today versus how he performs against some of the best defenses in the league?
Yeah, I mean, I remember we talked about this before the Thanksgiving Day game. You know, if you stacked up the defenses they had played through the course of the year, including Philadelphia's, which, you know, it wasn't necessarily reflected at the time, but you could tell that it cards during the early portion of the season that we were going to learn more against the Cowboys, against the Dolphins, Jets, 49ers, and Cowboys again. And so I think these games are important for him and important in the evaluation. And he hasn't played, you know, he hasn't played poorly. These weren't his worst games, the Dolphin game or the Cowboy game, certainly not the Cowboy game in the 2 quarters and a half. But yeah, I think it's important to see. I think it's the only thing to really keep us locked in and watching over these final 4 games.
I mean, you kind of answered this question already, but to me, what do you watch today? Like, what are you hoping to get out of today? I mean, obviously this is the Sam stuff, but is there anything else specifically, like on the defensive side of the ball, that you say, man, I'm really curious to see how player XYZ plays?
You know what, Logan, this might be overrated. You're a player. You would know more than I. But I've always loved, and this is a different situation because you're going to have a whole new staff. But you're down and out, and I do think there's something that you can measure in a player in the way they compete and the way they play in games that, you know, are meaningless to the standings, meaningless to a playoff race. And they've been shellacked defensively for 2 straight weeks, even though there were some things that were better, believe it or not, against Miami. You know, they seemed to, there was a ton of TFLs, if you recall. It seems like that game was, you know, months ago now. And decent performances. I think, you know, Henry was decent, and I like watching him. I actually want to watch the other defensive end, whose name escapes me, from Louisiana, the long
Andre Jones
guy.
Jr. Yeah.
Thank you. In a couple of weeks, but I love his length, and so there's some guys there to watch. I was kind of looking forward to seeing how Jahan progressed, because at times this year he's looked the part much more so than he has previously. I also want to see, you know, we know that John and Jahan are good players. I want to see how they play the rest of the way, because it's been a rough year for both of them, you know, certainly from a numbers standpoint. And, you know, they've paid both of those guys. So, they're going to be a part of what they do, I think. You know, next year I could theoretically, you know, trade them and John in particular. But I'd like to see the defense play a little bit better. But like a lot of fans, winning wouldn't be a good thing. Competing would be.
Yeah, no, 100%. Winning would be catastrophic potentially to the draft position. And you hate to say it, but like you watch how these things go, and the number of top players in a draft, you slip out, and it could change the whole nature of your franchise. Kevin Sheehan with us for another minute here on the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fan on a burgundy and gold game day. We're already into the 1 o'clock window, Kevin, so I don't know if any of your betting picks are tonight or tomorrow night, but also who you got in terms of the number and what it tells us in the Rams-Commanders game.
Well, on the show I gave out the Bears and Panthers, so we'll see how that works out. But I also gave out, believe it or not, Washington plus the point. There's something, I mean, nobody's giving them a chance, which, you know, Craig, as you know, is the way I sort of, you know, handicap games.
Yeah, there was a couple of stinky fish this week on the lines, and as we picked games on Friday on our show, I just looked at Anthony and went, "This doesn't make any sense. Give me the team, Sheehan method. Give me the team that makes no sense."
Yeah, and you know, there's I had somebody on from LA, didn't know this, but the Rams are 0-5 against teams coming off a bye week this year. And I mean, and that's straight up. So Washington coming off kind of that draining, you know, game in the rain against Baltimore. it wouldn't surprise me if Washington competes, especially on offense, and especially in the first half, maybe. Like, I kind of like Washington plus 3.5 in the first half line, but I like them overall plus 7 today. You know, by the half point, take the touchdown and see what happens. I like them against Dallas too, so take it for what it's worth.
You can't win them all. Very unfortunately, if you come remotely close, you're doing all right. Kevin Sheehan, can listen to him, of course, on the Team 980 weekdays 10 to 1. The Kevin Sheehan Show podcast as well, available wherever you get your pods. Thank you for your time, sir, and we will talk to you next week.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Kevin.
That is Kevin Sheehan with us here on the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fan. When we get back, a player, we just asked Kevin this question, right? Like, who are the guys that you're really watching? There's a player who I think keeps getting overlooked in all of this. I'd like to talk about that player next. It is the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
But my favorite story is, I think we were playing Cincinnati. Was it Cincinnati?
That's not what depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
It was Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
We're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Yeah. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. Like
take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not. I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman. Yeah. And the caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it was me and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like, we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like, we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30 yard gain. So we were all fired up, and Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So like 2 plays later, we're running again, and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him, and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like he was about as close as my hand was to my face, and he just disappeared into like mist. And he like swung me, and I fell right on my face, and I just was like, oh my gosh. And like I went back and watched the film, and it was crazy how quickly he was able to like do his little basketball weave and then like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle. And I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this. But he does a really good job of like kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So like he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile.
I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to like think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, you know, when you're playing elite football players like him, like there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, you know, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one. You know,
it's a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day here on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. We're broadcasting live from Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, you see a very distracted host and co-host as we're looking around. It's like, what are they looking at? There are TVs everywhere.
Yeah,
everywhere. We got Falcons, Panthers over here. We got Giants, Saints there. We got the Chiefs,
right here.
Patriots game on behind us with the sound on overhead. So you're kind of half listening to that. It's like, oh, what? I should turn around and look. Patrick Mahomes did something crazy. So we get you an update on all the games if you're driving around in the next 45 minutes or so. But Logan, everyone's talking about, what are you looking for the rest of the year? Sam Howell. Okay, we got it. You're obviously looking at Sam Howell. But what other young players? And there's one guy that never gets mentioned that is just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
Because people are like, oh, Emmanuel Forbes, Quan Martin, okay, we want to see the young guards. How do they play? Oh, I'm so bummed that Jamin Davis is out. And, I agree with all of those things. But what if I told you there was a guy who was drafted in the first round last year who hasn't had the season that we imagined that would also, by the way, him turning things on these last 4 games, be very helpful to Sam Howell? Because that's a reality. His name is Jahan Dotson, and I feel like he has gotten lost in the wash a little bit. And I think these next 4 games are huge for him.
I think so too. I think when it's interesting when you watch him play, and I think when you talk to like Santana and guys that have been around the league and played a lot of receiver, it's like Tana's like, I think he's a little frustrated. I think he's frustrated about not being involved, about not being featured, and I think that comes across. And here's a guy that, I think both you and I were very high on. I know Tana was very high on him as well. And it's just kind of like,
because he was killing training camp.
I know, and it's just so disappointing that he's not been productive, because I hate to break it to you. I don't care if he's a first-round pick. Like, if the new staff comes in and they watch this film, I think they're going to be like, we need to find somebody else. I think you made a comment about finding Mike Evans or finding the next big receiver, and like that's kind of the conversation that I would be having if I was coming into coach here after watching this film. I'd be like, man, like we got to upgrade the receiver room. And I think to your point, you want to see guys play better. And I think he's a guy that I like. I like his approach. I like his skill set. I like how he catches the football, all those things. But I need to see it. You know what I mean? I need to see it in games. And I think, I'm not talking bad about him. Just to be very clear about that, because, again, I do like him. But he hasn't played up to his standard.
Yeah, he would be the first guy to tell you.
And I think that's the thing that's disappointing about it. And ultimately, like when big changes are coming, like you need to make sure you're playing well. So it's him, and I really think kind of by extension, everybody in the receiving room. I think Terry McLaurin too. I think there's a lot of production left to be desired, and some of it's outside of their control, obviously, in terms of how the offense is being executed, how the offense is being called. But I also think like there's times like where we watch, some of that stuff from Miami where I'm like, hey, man, like, be more urgent here. Be more urgent to find this space. And I know, like, you're going to help your quarterback, you're going to help yourself. So I do think it is Jahan, but it's also the rest of the receiving room that I'm kind of like, I want to see more of those dynamic playmakers. Because if we don't see it, then it's kind of like, man, we need to go out and make some moves to bring in some more dynamic pieces around Sam.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty fascinating to see how that unit evolves. I think of, like, obviously one of the top candidates of Ben Johnson and what he's done with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah. And I look at a guy like Terry, and I'm like, you could be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't know, maybe.
It's different.
They're different players, but, like, there's a physicality they play with that if I'm Johnson, I come in and I show that tape. But you also wonder, like, okay, for Dotson's future, is he a guy that is a number 2 receiver? Or do you look at him as a new staff and be like, that's my slot guy? Can he play in the slot? Can he handle that responsibility? And does he have the skill set for it? Because he was a dynamic punt returner type coming out. And there was I think a thought initially, like, this guy might be your actual punt returner.
Right.
And so, like, that to me is an option as well. Do you downgrade Jahan Dotson as a receiver to get more out of him as a football player in total? Do you bring in that Mike Evans, who's going to be a free agent, or another big receiver? Depending on where you draft Marvin Harrison Jr., and you say that's my one. Terry's now the best 2 in the league,
right? And
Dotson's my slot guy. And then we'll see, investment-wise moving forward, what that turns into. But I would think it leads to either not re-signing Terry after his contract is up in a couple years, or moving on from Jahan before you pay him any significant money as well.
Yeah, and again, like those are like long-term things.
Yeah.
But I do think like either way.
Yeah,
you're drafting
more next year.
Yeah, you're drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. if he's available. I think that's definitely what's happening. But I think that's kind of the conversation I'm having, at least mentally. It's like maybe this skill position group wasn't as dynamic as I thought, right? Maybe there's some space to be desired here. And how do we upgrade? How do we make Sam the guy? Or how do we, if we have and we were talking about this with the other jobs that are open. When you look at the other jobs, there's playmakers. Like one of the jobs that we didn't mention was Atlanta. I think there's some people that think Arthur Smith are going to get fired. And I said I would prefer that job over this one because the offense is like ready to go. The defense is like ready to go. There's not going to be a lot of gymnastics. I need to find a quarterback. I need to make sure my play caller is excellent. And we're going to win some football games, and especially in a bad division. Can you say the same thing about the playmakers here would be my question. Again, I love Terry. I love Jahan. I love the really good stuff that they do. I just haven't seen a ton of it this year. And I think we both kind of acknowledge that there's a play calling element to that.
Yes.
But it's also like they need to show that kind of production to kind of let that new coach come in and say, hey, man, you're actually okay. The playmakers here are really, really good. And I think this is a good game to get that done because, like we said, this secondary is not as good as the last couple secondaries they've played. And that shouldn't matter. But I think it's going to matter from the standpoint of getting Sam more comfortable. And if Sam's more comfortable and you execute at a high level, you're going to have a lot of protection this game.
Yeah, there is a chemistry thing that undoubtedly Heineke, I think, had a better chemistry
Understanding what Terry does well, yeah.
Yeah, with Terry specifically last year, obviously, all the quarterbacks were able to find Jahan in the end zone a very high amount of times, all things considered, games played, etc. Last year, having those 7 touchdowns just hasn't been the same. This year. It hasn't grown this year. I think there is a little bit of a misnomer that he's having a worse year than last year. He's having a worse year based off expectations. His numbers are actually scarily similar to what they were last year. You just thought he'd make a much more significant leap. But it is a position that, look, mea culpa. I was trying to tell people this might be the best receiver room in the league. If Terry could take that next step, if he's a 1,500-yard receiver, I didn't think he was going to be as good as Jamar Chase, whatever, but I thought Jahan could make that up as a 2 to be like, yeah, they got 2 1s. Yeah. And instead it looks like they have 2 2s, and then Curtis Samuel's actually the guy who's really been fantastic this year on his role. But, of course, he is a pending free agent, so we'll see where he heads this offseason or if they want to bring him back here because he has been probably the best guy relative to expectations in the room. That's Logan Paulsen. I'm Craig Hoffman. It is the Take Command pregame show here on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Coming up in the next hour, we'll get you score updates from around the NFL as most of the games in the 1 o'clock window are in the second quarter right now. As we get closer to halftime, we'll get you updated on what's going on. But next, you'll hear from the Sports Junkies, their take on today's game on the Take Command pregame show.
Route on a guy and put your hands on somebody and kind of know what they like to do to shed and kind of get a feel for it. And so as you get to know them better and they get to know you, you kind of start playing that advanced like chess metric. And I think the familiarity breeds like a faster game quality because like I know exactly what this defense is. I know exactly how they're going to play this run. We ran it against them 6 weeks ago. Let's see it again. And we ran it against them last year twice. You know what I'm saying? So you get a really good feel for that. And obviously, like the fans in the stadium are just a little bit more up. And so I definitely think the divisional thing is real. And you talk about it differently. You talk about divisional games in the week in a different way. So it's definitely something that's 100% real. And, in the context of the Giants, like for whatever reason, they just have a good feel for this team. They have a good feel, good opportunity. Like, in our Take Fives, we talked about some Giant stories. Like I felt like during early in my playing career, I had a really good feel for what the Giants were doing. Like, I don't know what it was. When I went in that game, I just felt like I knew them really well. And sometimes when the Giants play the Commanders, it's like they just have a good knack and feel for kind of the holes and the wrinkles in the defense and ways to scheme stuff open. So I think divisional games are so fun. They're so fun to watch. They're so fun to play in. And I think they're fun to talk about because, like you said, even in this game where, we're going to talk about the Giants here in a second, Giants aren't a very good football team at the moment. Like, I don't know. And like Santana Moss is this is one of my favorite things he does. He's very consistent with his points of analysis. And anytime we're playing a divisional game, he's like, you can't count the other team out. And I think that's 100% accurate. And so whatever the record is, however bad the Giants have played, like, this team, the Commanders, need to come and like put their best foot forward and just say, like, we are the better football team, we're the better roster, and play like it. And I think ultimately that's what this game comes down to.
Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen. Logan, if you're watching on YouTube, you kind of just had a Logan Paulsen, Chris Collinsworth style slide in from Sunday Night Football. They used to do the solo shot on Al Michaels and then just slide in.
Yeah.
We should do that every Sunday. Just become a running bit on the show. Make people go watch it on YouTube if they want to laugh. Right now, though, we will actually hand things over to the Sports Junkies. Their thoughts on today's game. We always give it to you an hour into the Take Command pregame show. So without further ado, boys, take it away.
May not mean anything for San Francisco at the time. So Sean McVay's telling his boys, Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp and Kua and all those guys, we can make the playoffs. Right now, they're just on the outside looking in. What are you expecting from this game?
Well, I don't know. I guess I've come to the realization that I'm expecting doom and gloom. I really thought they'd put up a much better fight the last 2 weeks. I mean, I guess by last week, I thought that, Miami would probably have their way. I certainly didn't see, maybe I'm just the only guy in town, I did not see Dallas destroying us the way they did. But then Miami just doubled down, as we all know. And I just don't know how it's going to get much better. Jamin Davis is out. Not like he's some great player. He's certainly not. Ron knows he's gone. Ron steps in as D coordinator, 2 weeks ago and does no better. You could almost argue they did worse. I think Terry's having the worst season of his career. Dotson hasn't impressed. The defense is staggeringly awful. I mean, these are all just real things that we've been talking about, and none of it's really – like I kept waiting for the worm to turn, and it never did. So I'm very afraid for this team this week.
Yeah.
Very afraid.
The thing that blows me away still is just looking at the points against column and being outscored by 134, and the only team worse was that, coming into the week was the Carolina Panthers, and they're 1-12.
Yeah.
All right, so the only team worse than you guys getting outscored each week is a 1-12 team. That's how bad this team has been.
Yeah, no, it's terrible, and they have so many weapons, and I think a lot of us got an opportunity to watch that Rams-Ravens game last week with the Commanders being off, and it's just really impressive, even though the Rams lost. I mean, Stafford just seems to be really playing at a pretty high level.
Stafford's got 10 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, and then, obviously people have been talking about Puka Nacua. This guy comes out of nowhere with 82 catches, 1,100 yards. Obviously, you got Cooper Kupp. I mean, they just have so many weapons. We're so broken down. I'm already betting. I'm on FanDuel. I'm going under the team total for the Commanders. This is all about, and I know people cringe when I say this, if I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, but it's true. This is all about the growth and development of Sam Howell. I mean, it honestly is. Season's over. This whole season has essentially been a referendum on him, and I think it continues. And so he needs to come up big. There's a lot of pressure on him. I don't have a great vibe about it, not because I'm not a big Sam Howell fan. I am. I just think the odds are stacked against him. And I just wonder, is this team going to be able to withstand a couple punches without just laying down the way they have the last few weeks? And I'm very nervous.
And we also talked about this week. When you are 4-9 and your entire coaching staff's getting fired,
About 1 minute left.
And you go to the Bahamas, or you go to Florida, or you go, I don't know where you go to the beach somewhere. I think it's just a natural inclination as a human to come in and go, man, I'm ready for the season to be over.
You get a taste of it.
You know what I mean? I'm ready for the season to be over. And I'm not saying they're not going to try and go out there, early, get pumped up, you want to play well.
No, they're going to headbutt each other.
They're professionals.
But
once they're down 14-3,
it's hard.
We see it all the time. We saw it with the Chargers on Thursday night.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
I have an ominous feeling about this. I hope I'm wrong.
Well, you should. All right, so what's your prediction?
My prediction will be, let's say, 38-13.
Rams 38-13. All right, I'm going to go 34-17. All right, I think it's a 17-point cover. I would be shocked, really shocked, if Washington pulls this win off. So
prove us wrong, guys.
We'll see. All right, back to you in the studio, boys.
All right, thank you very much, Jason, EB. So not exactly high hopes, but after they've lost the last two games, 90-25, something like that, total score, it's pretty easy to understand why. I did want to ask about that human element, and I always think you're an anomaly. So in some way, like, you're the only guy I can't ask because, well, you're the only one sitting here with a headset, unless our engineer, Tim. Tim, you didn't play in the NFL, did you? No? Okay. But you were also a guy who was hyper-focused on your own stuff. Not necessarily, which there are players that on this team, certainly, that are like that, but it's not like you are representative of all NFL players. And I would say if I had to bet, you might even be an outlier in that regard. But that idea of it's almost spring break your senior year.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm so close to graduating. Just get me out of here. With this bizarrely late bye that they have in a season that is all but lost at 4-9. How much do you worry about guys just being like, God, I got to play 4 more of these?
I mean, I do think that's something to be concerned about. I think when I look back at my career, even you mentioned I was super hyper focused. I'd have to talk to myself every day. Be like, hey man, 4 games. Don't be in the car just yet. We're here. Be where your feet are. Let's get this done. And I was very diligent about that kind of thing. And it's hard because you don't want to get hurt. You don't want to be nursing injury going in the off season. You want to spend time with your family. You want to get out of this. Like, I was thinking about it. Like, there's really nothing else like it in terms of, like, the demand mentally and physically, like in the sports sphere. I try to think of a good analogy. It's like running like a marathon every week or like a 10K every week or something like that. Something very, very challenging, but just the repetition of it. So there's this natural, like near the end of the season, even when you're doing well, to kind of just like lose a little focus because you're like, I need a break. I've been so dialed in. So I do think that's a big concern. I think, to push back on something that the Junkie said, though, is I think that's a great point. That's a fantastic point, something that should definitely be accounted for. I do think that Ron and the defense did a better job against Miami, as a whole. I think the linebackers did an excellent job. I thought the defensive line played much more disciplined, much more on it. And outside of 2 explosive plays off defensively, I thought they did a pretty solid job. Obviously, there was that drive in the fourth quarter where, it was 13 consecutive runs or whatever.
Yeah.
I felt like that's kind of what they were alluding to there with, like, just totally kind of mailing the bag in.
But at that point, you're down 38, whatever. Like,
yes.
Human nature is what it is.
And so I do think that this defense this week, I'm not making any declarative statements, but I do think that they have an opportunity to play better because while LA does a lot of really cool, innovative stuff offensively, it's through the quarterback position. And so if you can handle the bunches, if you can handle the jet motion, they don't have a lot of wrinkles. It's not like you're playing Miami where it's like, who's on the field? Who's this guy? Is he a running back? Is he a receiver? This guy's motioning over here. This guy's motioning back, and then they're going to reverse run over. It's not
Miami has your head spinning, and then they do it faster than everyone else.
And it's not that kind of offense. And so I do think it'll be a little bit more simple, right? And I think Ron has shown an ability, at least in the 1 week, to kind of get those guys playing a little bit more consistently, especially in the front. Now, can you get that in the back end? I don't know.
Well, that's the key, right?
But
you say, can they handle bunches and through 15 weeks or going into week 15? The answer is no.
They haven't done it, right? And I get that 100%. But I do think that there is a way to win this game for the team, unlike the last couple of games. But I do think that personal element is so important because, like they said, if there's any kind of adversity, is this team strong enough of character to be like, hey, we got this. Let's keep fighting. It's just so hard to do that at this point of the season with the coach potentially getting fired, with the huge changes that are kind of on the horizon.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really great point that they brought up.
I think that there is, if you want to spin it optimist, though, like there are plenty of guys with plenty to play for. Like Emmanuel Forbes, Keim had the media scrum with he and Nikki and Emmanuel on his podcast this week. And to hear like the lightness in Emmanuel's voice, especially there was a question about like the simplification of the defense. And he's like, look, I haven't played in it yet because I've been hurt, but like, it's way easier for us in the back end. I can already tell from the sidelines.
Oh.
And so it was interesting to hear Emmanuel talk about that. Obviously, Casey Tuhill, for instance, in a contract year, the young guys on that DN spot trying to prove that they belong. Linebackers, same thing. Now with Jamin out, like who's gonna get those reps and all that stuff. It becomes super self-motivating where you have guys in roles where they're either trying to prove something to the team, to themselves, or to a new team.
Yeah.
And so there should be plenty of motivation. But I do think, to their point, you get down 14-3 early. That goes a lot faster when you're on a bad team than the fight you would show if it's like, hey, guys, we got a playoff spot on the line. Like, let's go.
No, I'm 100% with that. And, I talked to some of those guys, and you can tell it's important to them. Every second is important to them because of the things you talked about. But there is something, and it's momentum, whatever it is. Just when it gets bad, you're kind of like, oh, here we go again. And it's really hard to handle that adversity when the team's not doing well. So, it'll be really interesting. Hopefully, they can do something positive today and execute. And I also think if the offense plays a little bit better than they have in the past couple of weeks, which, again, is something we talked about at the beginning of the show, it might not feel out of reach, even if you are down 14-7. Oh, the offense went down and scored well. There are things that can kind of mitigate some of that. But I do think that is a kind of a dark cloud looming over this game for the Commanders is the personal element, the emotional element, because while there are guys that, that you can, like just talking to them for 5 seconds, you feel how important every moment is. There are other guys you can just tell they're thinking about other stuff. And that's the nature of the game.
Yeah, nature of the league. 53 guys. Everyone's a little bit different, and we'll see how they handle it this afternoon. Kickoff in L.A. just after 4:05. Of course, we'll have live coverage with the Burgundy and Gold Game Day in-game show coming up following us here on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. We're also streaming live on YouTube, live from Tap Sports Bar here at MGM National Harbor. So next is our Tale of the Tape segment, Logan. And you have been talking about how you think, despite the point total being the exact same from Thanksgiving, this defense has played a little bit better against Miami. Let's dive into some of those intricacies in what it is that you saw Ron Rivera try to change, and hopefully that he can change it significantly more during this bye week. That is next on the Take Command pregame show. Take Command pregame show live from Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. Logan Paulsen there, Craig Hoffman here. Also streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. We'll go around the NFL. Coming up in just a few minutes, bunch of stuff happening. Tommy DeVito just took a shot in the Giants game. Kind of a dirty hit as he was sliding.
I hate when people do that. Dirty hit because he's sliding. The guy's already left his feet.
I looked like a dirty hit. Did he leave his feet before he started sliding?
As he started sliding, he kind of was jumping, and in slow-mo it looks terrible. But I'm sure in real life it was kind of like the guy's just
bang,
trying.
Bang.
Yeah,
all right, I'll defer to you. I did not get a clean. I just saw a lot of contact.
It's more. I didn't really. We'll see it again here in a second. But to me, it's more like that. Like whatchamacallit. Like. It's so hard for defensive players to make the right play in that situation.
Yeah.
Because of how late it's happening, the quarterbacks are getting so good at sliding late. But, yeah, whatever. Go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, he's back up. Giants are driving with about 45 seconds to go in the half. Carolina's lighting up for a field goal attempt late in the first half. So we'll get to the scores all around the league coming up in just a few minutes. But, Logan, you've been consistent, which makes sense. Like, it's not like you make up your opinions. You do the research, you watch the tape, and then you tell us what you see. And, well, if that's the case, then you saw something different on tape against Miami from the Commanders' defense. It's not going to change because they had a bye week. The tape didn't change. That game happened. So you've been trying to tell people, though, like, hey, this defense, even though they gave up 45, did look different against the Miami Dolphins in a way that gives you a lot of, I don't want to say confidence, but gives you some hope that they can play better down the stretch, which obviously low bar considering what they've done so far this season. But what schematically changed for Washington in that game that you think they can execute better moving forward?
So one of the things that stuck out to me is just like how much more confident like Cody Barton and Jamin Davis were playing. I think one of the things we talked about in the preview show was how Miami is going to run drift, a ton of drift. And the very first play of the game, they run like open drift to the open side. So they have a hard outside zone action. They force Jamin to step up. They have Tyreek Hill run the drift, which is that 10-yard speed cut to space. And Jamin steps to the run. You're like, oh, no, this is going to die. And then Jamin, instead of kind of sitting in the line of scrimmage like he would normally do, just beelines for the angle, totally cuts off the throw, and they have to check the ball down. And so when I went through every single play, we talk about green and red and all that stuff, there was so much more green in this game.
For those that aren't familiar with Logan's scoring system, he ranks every play good, green, bad, red.
Yes. So there was so much more green, and obviously the red plays were very bad because there's explosives and stuff like that.
Right.
But at least I thought the floor rose for the defense because guys were doing the right thing. Like I thought, in the back end they were a little bit more consistent. I thought St. Juste played much better. You could tell he understood kind of where his help was going to be, and so that simplification of the defense and simplification of the rules, which is something we talked about quite a bit leading into that game, showed up for me. Now, it didn't lead to a win, and I'm totally aware of that, and I don't think that they're going to win this game, but I do think you're putting guys in better positions just to evaluate them. Because Benjamin St. Juste, like there was a double move in that game. He got a PI on it, and he played it about as clean as he could have played it, and I thought that is a new version of St. Juste. And he's just doing the right thing. He's in the right position. He's playing the technique that they want. And it's like 50-50 about whether you get a PI. But that's the technique that they want. And I thought, man, that's a positive step for him as opposed to biting on the double move, totally falling down, or totally like losing the receiver in coverage, all those different things. So I thought just on a down-to-down basis, there was so much more consistency. I thought Cody did a great job in some of these quarters looks where he's the kind of plug player underneath of matching the quarterback's eyes as opposed to just buzzing to strengths, like kind of getting in throwing windows. And I thought this is football you can win with if it gets a little bit better from an explosive play standpoint. Because I think about it, and I hate making excuses. I hate putting stuff in context because people don't like to hear the context.
No, they just want to be mad.
Yes, but there's 21 points off explosive plays, which you can't take away. And then there's 7 points on an interception return for a touchdown. That's 21 points right there. right?
You said 21 off, and then another 7, so 28.
So, no, it's 14 and then 21.
Oh, 14 off explosives.
Yeah.
You said 21
Sorry.
initially.
Yeah, but
you got to give me the right numbers. I'm bad enough at math as it is.
So, and so that is, when you do the math there, you end
Sure.
up in that like 24-point range against Miami, which, again, you can't do that. But I thought that the consistency of those other plays was high enough that is a reasonable outcome.
Right.
If, like, for example, there was a mental mistake on the first touchdown of Tyreek Hill. 2 people didn't do the right thing, and that's according to Ron. So you look at that and you say, okay, well, if you get that corrected, maybe that's not an explosive play. Maybe, and obviously Tyreek Hill does Tyreek Hill things on the second one, but I do think there's stuff there that you say, versus simpler defense with less team speed, maybe.
Right.
Maybe the floor of the defense with the simpler structure seems to be higher.
And another week of practice, by the way, because that was, they're installing this new stuff and taking things down in a week where you're facing one of the toughest schematic defenses, and Tyreek Hill, who breaks every rule, no matter what defense you're playing. So I do think that's interesting, and to me, the defensive back stuff is the most important, and it becomes even more important this week with Emmanuel Forbes back in the lineup. Forbes will play after missing a couple of weeks due to his elbow injury, and he had started to look a little bit better, and then obviously got ejected in the one game, so that was a huge bummer. So it's just been kind of a Murphy's Law comedy of errors for the last half of the season so far for Emmanuel. See if this final quarter can turn things around for him. But can they communicate those bunches? Can they communicate the stacks? Can they communicate crossing routes, which have killed them for years on end? And it seems like some of the stuff you're talking about is going to make that easier, because it is easier. And that's the thing about defense is, the perfect scheme on paper executed poorly is not as good as an inferior scheme that may not have the perfect answer, but it's executed well and can, at the very least, limit damage if it can't straight up stop something.
And I feel like I saw that, and I feel like I saw that kind of progression. And so, again, it's not perfect. It's an imperfect setup.
Yeah.
But I also think that that those steps are important. Just because, again, I don't know if they're going to win the game, but at least it helps you evaluate the roster, because everyone's saying, "Oh, the roster's so terrible." And I don't agree with that. I don't think it's a terrible roster. I think they've been kind of put in a bad spot. Obviously, there are areas you can upgrade, but I don't think. And so for me, I'm excited just to see that, to see if they can develop. Is really what I'm getting at.
The other thing that I'm curious about today: can you generate a pass rush? It's something that Rivera
they also
talked
did
about.
Blitz more. They blitzed
They blitzed a lot more, but with alignment, with creating certain matchups, simulated pressures, can you get more pressure? It's basically impossible against Miami because Tua gets rid of the ball so fast. Stafford, absolutely not the case. So can you generate pressure today? Huge test, something to watch for the Commanders against the Rams. That's Logan Paulsen. I'm Craig Hoffman here on the Take Command pregame show, 106.7 The Fan, the Team 980, streaming live on YouTube and on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, we will discuss the rest of the games around the NFL, as most of the games in the 1 o'clock window are at halftime. Danny Rouillet will join us an hour from right now, so half the show down, but a great second half to come here on the Take Command pregame show.
I think we were playing Cincinnati. Was it Cincinnati?
That's not what depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
It was Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
We're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. Like
take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman, man. The caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
So there was this play where we call it like it was, what is it, 19 Zorro. So basically like versus a 3-4 structure with an outside linebacker who is Von Miller in this case, I would get help from the fullback, like on inside help. So I could be really aggressive on my reach, really violent to the reach. And so it was me and DY, is a physical son of a gun. And so we take Von Miller and we put him, like, no joke, in the water cooler. Like, we put him way out there on the sideline. And we were like, this guy ain't nothing. Like, we're going to, we were so fired up. And so it ended up being like a 25 or 30 yard gain. So we were all fired up. And then Kyle's like, all right, let's come back to it. So like 2 plays later, we're running again and we're running to the right. And I was like, oh man, we are about to tee this dude up real quick. Just tune him up nice and good. And so I go out to get him and I'm firing off the ball. My hat's low. I'm flat back. And I swear to God, like he was about as close as my hand was to my face. And he just disappeared into like mist, and he like swung me, and I fell right on my face, and I just was like, oh my gosh, and like I went back and watched the film, and it was crazy how quickly he was able to like do his little basketball weave, and then like just disappear from my vision and get inside and make the tackle, and I was like, oh, so now he's upset. So then the next play, I'm like all tentative and nervous. And I felt like Vaughn did. I watched this on film, so I knew he did this. But he does a really good job of like kind of like playing it like a boxer a little bit. You know what I mean? Like kind of rope-a-doping you a little bit. So like he lets you get one, right? Where I got after him. He makes you look like an idiot. And then the next time I was super tentative on him, and he literally did like a double stick like he was going to make me miss, and then just grabbed my neck and then threw me over the pile. I was like, man, this is going to be tough. I got to like think of a plan here in the next 15 minutes so I don't look like an idiot for the rest of the game. But, when you're playing elite football players like him, like there's a reason they're elite. So if you get one on them, it's probably because they want. They probably because they're letting you get one.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap.
We're streaming live on YouTube, live from Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. Do you approve of my snack that I'm going to eat in the next break?
Yeah, just checking it out.
We got a Scratch Rice Krispie treat.
Not a lot of protein in there, Coach.
No, protein bars are hard for me to find because I can't do any of the whey stuff.
The dairy stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it's really quite a pain. If anyone's got a good plant-based protein bar, send them my way. Tweet me at Craig Hoffman. Instagram at Craig_Hoffman. Threads. Find a way. Send me an email. Find a way to recommend a good plant-based protein bar. Not because I want to, but because I have to. All right, so let's go around the NFL.
Yep.
Because we want to. And we have to because that's the segment of the show. So we got all the games. Let's circle back to the games from yesterday and Thursday in a little bit. Let's get everybody updated on the scores that are happening right now. A lot of these games at the half. Bears and Browns almost at the half. Justin Fields has the Bears driving, trying to get at least 3 more on the board with 22 seconds left. Currently tied at 7. Flacco, 140 and a touchdown in the first half. And did you see the touchdown that Fields threw in this game?
No.
It was an insane, escape. He's on the right hash, rolls all the way to his left. You're like, oh, is he going to run it in? Nope, just loads up and fires a dart to Cole Kmet. Excellent play by Justin Fields, who is making things very interesting for the Bears. Like, do they consider sticking with him and kind of doing what Washington's considering?
I think you trade him. I think you can get a second or third round pick for him, and I think with the new ownership, and I think I haven't watched Williams yet. Caleb Williams.
Yeah, Caleb Williams.
I haven't watched him yet, but every indication is that he's the guy.
Yeah.
So if that's true, then you make the move, you trade him. I think a team like Atlanta would be a perfect fit for what he does well. So
I don't disagree with that. Seems like a good trade, both teams.
Yeah.
If you're Atlanta specifically, where you're like, you want to keep Arthur Smith, you want to have this super dynamic run game, you want speed all over.
I would.
What would you give up a second?
I'd give up a second for sure for it.
First?
No.
I can't give up a first for me.
I know, but
with the contract is looming. So
I know, yeah.
Second.
So and maybe even yeah. But I like that fit a lot, and it just for how dynamic they were with Marcus Mariota. Justin Fields is a significantly better player in my opinion, much more dynamic in terms of our talent and playmaking ability. So I look at it and I say, man, let's make that marriage happen.
Yeah. Someone did ask me this week on YouTube, like in the comments section, would you consider Fields here? My answer was no, because I think they're different stylistically, but I don't know if Fields is that much better than Sam. And from the contract situation, Sam's in a way better spot.
And I also think it's just the reason it works in Atlanta is because he's going to be utilized that way.
Right.
He's going to be maximized in Atlanta. Here, if you were to put Sam and Fields in this offense, it's not even close. Sam is significantly better than Justin Fields in this offense. But if he goes to Atlanta, you're like, oh my gosh, look how dynamic Justin Fields is. Oh, he's the next Jalen Hurts. But it's because they've installed a system that can support that athletic ability and minimize some of the difficult throws he's having to make, in an offense like what Chicago's running now.
No doubt. All right, Bucks and Packers just underway in the second half. 14:36 to go in the third quarter. 13-10 Bucks leading. Baker Mayfield 187 yards and a touchdown to Mike Evans. Chris Godwin over 100 yards in the first half as well.
Nice throw on that touchdown of Mike Evans, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. Ripped the ball in the red zone, kind of up the middle of the field. But yeah, you got the Packers, who are 6-7. They're 4-2 at home. Bucks battling for the NFC South. It is a I'm like, is it a weird year in the NFL, or is this just what happens in the NFL? I feel like there are so many teams that are in it. Yeah. They're right there around 500. These two teams certainly in that mix.
Yeah, and I think if you're the Packers, I think you feel pretty good, with a guy who's getting his first kind of start as a quarterback and a guy who's been in the wings for a while, shown you enough, I think, to make you feel pretty confident, especially given the young receiving core. That would be awesome if they could win this game, make that playoff push, and, kind of say, hey, like Jordan Love kind of put a stamp on it and say, hey, man, I'm getting better, and you made the right decision.
They might be in the situation as close. I mean, obviously they're in playoff mode potentially, but they might be in the situation in terms of quarterback evaluation that's closest to here.
Oh, yeah.
Now, they're going to have a much worse draft pick than Washington, but, they have to make a decision now on Love pretty much from a contract situation. So they've got a decision to make. And, Love's had some great games and some down games. I would say a similar-ish season in that way to Sam, where there's kind of, if you want to be an optimist, you can be an optimist. If you want to be a pessimist, there's plenty of bad film to look at for Jordan Love as well. Texans-Titans, Will Levis 114 yards in the first half to lead the Titans to a 13-3 lead as this one gets underway in the third quarter. Texans have had a bizarre year in that we thought they were going to be terrible. Then they looked really good. Stroud not playing today with the concussion. So I don't if I'm Houston, I want to get in the playoffs. I want to see if I can get C.J. Stroud a playoff game, get that experience, get him to understand what that atmosphere is like.
100%.
If you're Tennessee, hey, this is great. I'll say this is great for Washington if Tennessee can win this game, because it's another 5-8 team that could put a sixth win on the board and separate themselves in terms of draft position.
And also, it's so fun to watch Will Levis.
Yeah.
I mean, he is, I've heard him described as fun, and every time I watch him play, I'm like, you are fun to watch. It's not always the prettiest thing, but you are ripping footballs. You're trying to run over defensive linemen. It's a wacky bit, but I love watching him play.
A couple more games at the half. Jets and Dolphins, an outburst in the second quarter for Miami. They're up 24-0. Zach Wilson is out of this game temporarily. I don't know if he's out yet, but Trevor Siemian came in and replaced him. Looked like an injury type of thing late in the second half. Meanwhile, Tua Tagovailoa, monster 168-yard half, including a 60-yard touchdown to Jalen Waddle. Raheem Mostert, 2 more touchdowns. He's got 20 on the year, which is bananas.
Just insane. It's an insane deal.
And they're doing this, by the way, up 24-0 against the top 5 defense, who Washington will see next week.
Yeah.
And they're doing it all without Tyreek Hill.
Yeah. And the Dolphins are just so fun to watch, man. And it makes it easier when the Jets' offense is literally doing absolutely nothing. But it just shows you how good this Miami offense can be. So.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Chiefs up 14-10 on the Patriots. Patrick Mahomes, a key interception. Also does have a touchdown, though, to Rashee Rice. Patriots hanging tough behind Bailey Zappi at home.
Yeah, and I just think that New England defense, man, they deserve a ton of credit. Every single game, they're fighting. They're making stuff happen for them. Interception by Matu. Is that how you say his name? Great job by him.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and he that's just what the team is right now. And if they could get any kind of quarterback play, I think we're not talking about Bill Belichick getting fired there potentially. Yeah, or them moving on, excuse me.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Also, obviously, the Patriots, a team to watch in terms of the.
Just fumbled it right there.
The Chiefs did. It looks like a Patriot with.
Chiefs fumbled. Patriots picked it up.
Nice.
So talking about that defense, they delivered.
Peppers on the recovery. There is a flag on the play, so we'll see if it's coming back. The way Mahomes' body language is, kind of looks like it. So we'll see in just a moment. But if the Patriots can pull this off and Washington were to lose today, those two teams are tied in the win-loss column.
Yeah,
and you might get up all the way to the number 3 pick.
Which would be
although I guess the bad thing about New England is that you've beaten them. So the tiebreaker, same thing with the Cardinals. So.
Okay, yeah, I'll let you handle that. But yeah, obviously Patriots, if they lose, draft stock's improving, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. is right on the docket there, so that's exciting.
Yeah. By the way, if you want more draft coverage, our interview with Matt Miller this week, excellent on the Friday edition of the Take Command podcast. Check that out wherever you get your pods.
Looks like a holding in that Patriots game, by the way.
Yeah, so continuing on for the Chiefs, fumble comes off the board. Giants and Saints, 7-6 New Orleans at the half. Super wacky game here. Giants kicker hurt himself on a kickoff, so he's been out, and that's cost them. Saints had a kind of a odd first half, only 84 yards passing for Derek Carr. Does have a touchdown though. DeVito, 4 carries, 36 yards to be the Giants' leading rusher. But Saquon also had a sick catch very early in this game.
Yeah.
And I'm looking up right now. The Saints have the football. DeVito did, we mentioned earlier, he took that big hit, which to me I saw another look. I feel okay calling it a little dirty. This guy came in from the side and walloped him as he slid. It's like he's already past you, dude.
Did he get knocked out?
But Tyrod Taylor did come in, so I don't know if either he's out, or whether he will come back, but we'll keep an eye on that, obviously. And then the last game that is ongoing right now, Falcons and Panthers in a driving rainstorm in Charlotte. Falcons up 7-3.
Have you seen this picture of them at halftime? Have you seen this picture?
I have not.
This is the stadium at halftime.
Oh, there is nobody there.
There's not a soul. Not a soul in the stands.
Yeah. Hey, I can go watch a terrible football team and a terrible football game in the driving rain and be miserable, or I could do anything else, and the entire city of Charlotte has chosen anything else.
I'll do anything else, yeah.
And at least at halftime, taking cover. There's got to be like 4 people there that are willing to watch. Maybe. We'll take a look at the rest of the slate. The games already in the books, as well as a couple of huge games to come, including the game of the day, Cowboys and Bills. Next, this is the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day. Back to Commanders-Rams at the top of the hour here on the Take Command pregame show. Burgundy and Gold game day on 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen, live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. Of course, we're live on YouTube as well at the Team 980 and at 106.7 The Fan, and streaming live on the free Odyssey app. Logan, a quick couple of updates. One, it looks like Tommy DeVito is taking snaps on the sideline, so the Saints just scored, making it 13-6. New Orleans now on top, but Giants starting quarterback should be coming back after exiting fear of concussion late in that second half. And then also the Chiefs just tacked on a field goal. Tampa scored as well, so 20-10 Tampa over Green Bay. Chiefs now up 17-10 on New England. As for the games that have already happened this week, and then we'll do a quick preview of some of the games still to come, is it safe to say that the Chargers are the biggest disappointment in the NFL this year after what happened to them? Staley fired, obviously, after the 63 to whatever the hell it wound up being lost to Vegas on Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's close, and I think you got to acknowledge they've had some pretty significant injuries at the skill position spots. And I think it's what you see, like, in terms of roster construction when you've got a team that's so top-heavy. And, like, a couple injuries put you in a bad spot. And, like, it also shows you, in my opinion, how much they're relying on Herbert to elevate the roster. So, is it surprising? Yes. Coupled with the injuries, is it kind of understandable? Sure. But I think there's no defense for losing a game that way. And I think there's been rumors of kind of the ownership being unhappy with Staley for a long time now. And I think this is it just kind of coming to a head here. And I don't think it's a bad firing. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think when you watch how, the Junkies mentioned this with the Commanders, if the defense specifically for the Chargers just look listless, man. They just look like
when
so
Staley's
unmotivated.
a defensive guy and that happens, like, that's good night. I think, like, unlike Washington and some other teams that are bad, the Chargers have so much top-end talent.
Yeah.
You just can't have a season like this.
Yep.
You can't have a top whatever quarterback Herbert is, Derwin James, Joey Bosa, Keenan Allen. I know that some of those guys have missed time, but, like, if your roster's that good and has that many stars, you can't have a season like this.
Right.
Of the 3 games that were yesterday, 2 blowouts, 1 awesome.
Yeah.
Vikings-Bengals was crazy.
Yeah.
And T. Higgins scored one of the best touchdowns you will ever see in your life to tie the game and send it to overtime. I mean, to catch that ball, be up near the pylon, turn around and saber the ball over the end zone. That was nuts. Would you have ever tried that?
No, I don't think so. I think, but it just shows you his awareness, his body control, all the things that make him a great football player were on full display on that play, and just love the awareness. And
how about Jake Browning too?
Yeah, the past couple of weeks, man, he's been awesome. Like, he just looks like a guy who's super dialed in and playing excellent football. And I know we talk about backups all the time struggling, but he looks like a guy who's just playing. He's not that worried about making mistakes the way he's been in the past. And I just love seeing that when guys get an opportunity, they step to the table and make a bunch of plays. So good for him, good for the Bengals, and a truly tremendous play by T. Higgins.
I think it's also a reminder there might have been a reason that the first guy who ever got a job, it was the guy who invented the joke of, like, oh, hey, if you had dinner with Sean McVay, you'll be an NFL head coach. Was Zach Taylor? Like, Sean had Zach as an OC in LA.
Yep.
And he got the Bengals job, and everyone's like, who the hell is Zach Taylor?
Yeah, that's right.
Turns out that dude can coach his face off and has been doing a great job since Joe Burrow went down. Meanwhile, Steelers dropped to 7-7. Colts up to 8-6. Big win for Indy as they try to stay in the playoff push behind Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, it is crazy to think about what the Colts would be if, like, Anthony Richardson was still playing quarterback for them. Like that, you can tell they're really well coached. The offensive line's excellent. Michael Pittman Jr. is not the most flashy guy, but they use him in a good way. Alec Pierce, the second receiver there, is a big play threat. They run the football well. And then defensively, man, they've just improved each and every week with a bunch of guys who weren't necessarily the biggest names in the draft, but they're just playing much better. And it's great to see. Gardner Minshew's limited some of the kind of variance in his game, which has helped them kind of come out on top. So, I think the Colts are going to be dangerous. And I think they're a perfect example of where the Commanders are at. Last year they were talking about how it was maybe one of the worst rosters in football, so underdeveloped, underperforming. And it just shows you how important a motivator is as a coach. and schematically getting guys on the right page. And I think you see that here with who's the coach there?
With Shane Steichen.
With Shane Steichen and what he's been able to do with that group, and just how important it is. You always talk about this, but having a good teacher in that position.
Yes.
And I think they're Exhibit A, and what a good coach could do here for the Commanders.
Could that coach be Ben Johnson of the Lions? He got his offense back on track yesterday. Amazing what happens when you stop turning the ball over and don't go 1 for 5 on 4th down, which the Lions had done not once, but 2 consecutive weeks prior to yesterday. They beat up on the Broncos, who had been playing so well. But Denver, now it's amazing to say Denver dropped to 7-7 because that means they were above 500 considering where they were. Crazy. But the Lions now 10-4. They're 5-2 at home. They dropped 21 points in the second quarter and then followed it up with another 21 in the second half for a 42-17 victory. And you look at the offensive numbers. Goff, 278 for 5 touchdowns. Amon-Ra St. Brown had over 100 yards and a touchdown. And Jahmyr Gibbs, 100 yards and a touchdown as well. The balance was there. It is the perfect Lions day.
Yeah, and it's great to see that. And I say it's great to see that, but I think one of the things, what I mean by that is when an offense is well executed and sharp, like this is the result. And you can tell they are hungering and planning and finding ways to get balls to the playmakers' hands. So I just enjoy watching that kind of football, and they deliver that. When they're at their best, it's very hard to find a group that does it better than them.
No doubt about it. Their offense been great since basically the middle of last year. 49ers and Cardinals is the game coming up, obviously, or one of the games coming up in the 4 o'clock window. Cardinals 3-10 on the year. Niners 10-3 and have been rolling since their bye. Cowboys and Bills game of the day. Buffalo favored by 2.5 in this one at home, even though Dallas coming off that big win over Philadelphia.
And I just think it shows you, and I'm not big in the MVP thing right now. I haven't really done my research on it. But when Josh Allen is Josh Allen, there's no more impactful football player to his team. And when he's playing good football, especially last week, what game was that? I forget.
They played
Kansas City, right?
Yeah.
When they played Kansas City, he looked like that guy. He doesn't turn the football over. I think he's got 1 turnover, but running, extending plays, being physical, throwing the football down the field. He's a tough out. And I think getting them at home with his skill set, especially if he's kind of coming out of that low variance point, it's going to be a tough game for them. And I think to your point about the Cowboys, they're coming off. This is a tough stretch of games for them.
Super tough.
And I'm really excited to see what Josh Allen does, because if it's Josh Allen being Josh Allen, I don't think Dallas wins. But if he struggles a little bit, the Dallas defense turns the football over the way they've been doing it. I think the Cowboys it could be a blowout the other way kind of thing.
For sure. Like, as wide of a variance of outcomes as possible today between these two teams. And the Cowboys have been much better at home. So can they take the show on the road, literally?
Yep.
They're just 3-3 away from AT&T Stadium. I think that's a fascinating thing to watch. I mean, Dak has been playing at such an exceptionally high level. But the Bills' defense, obviously, trying to figure things out post all the injuries they had earlier in the year. They started to level a little bit, finally, after they had struggled. So can they keep it up against one of the best offenses in the league? Ravens and Jags tonight. Baltimore 3.5-point favorites at home, on the road for Sunday Night Football. Obviously, a huge game for Jacksonville, and for Baltimore, a chance to. They can't lock up the 1 seed officially tonight, but they could give themselves some real room.
Right.
You see Miami obviously winning today, but they could take that next step closer to make everything happening. Or every AFC team needing to go through M&T Bank Stadium.
And I think the Ravens are definitively one of the best teams in football at the moment. Like the way they run the ball, the way Lamar Jackson's playing, on the defensive side of the ball, what they're doing. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars have the ability to do that. They just are incredibly inconsistent. So I'm hoping that tonight we see them and we see a healthy Trevor Lawrence. I mean, he's coming off a high ankle sprain 2 weeks ago. And that defense, which is so talented for Jacksonville, play to that level of talent. And if they can, I think it's going to be a really competitive game. But if Jacksonville is the Jacksonville we saw last week and Trevor Lawrence is hurt and not throwing the football well, I think they're going to get their doors blown off by the Ravens. Thank you.
Eagles and Seahawks is Monday Night Football. Now, Jalen Hurts has been sick, and he was downgraded to questionable.
He flew separately
today. So, flew separately because they're not trying to get anyone else sick. We have no idea what to expect. The Eagles haven't lost multiple games in a row forever. Obviously, they've been so good, but are so good for so long. I mean, Hurts has still lost single-digit games as a starter in his career.
Crazy.
but they're 10-3 and going the wrong way. And there was a report from Jay Glazer earlier today that others have since confirmed that they've kind of made a change in defensive coordinator, changing responsibilities.
Yeah.
Sean Desai is going to go up into the coach's booth. Matt Patricia is the one who's actually going to call the plays into the green dot, into the linebacker. So pretty interesting.
That is, yeah. For a team that's 10-3, yeah.
Change. But their defense, they've survived on their offense for a lot of the year. Defense has not been good, but they're not. I respect Sirianni for not being afraid to make a change.
Yeah, and I think that's the point there, right? Is like when you watch the Philly defense, they definitely aren't playing to the same level as the offense. And I think as you're going to play better teams, you're going to play this, San Francisco's, the Dallas Cowboys, the Bills, whoever it is. You need to put up a little bit more resistance so the offense can kind of get you out of some situations. And I think right now, like one of the things that I'm always so concerned about when watching these high-level teams is how much do they put on the quarterback. And right now, so much of that offense is on Jalen Hurts making plays off schedule and just being excellent. You can't win a lot of games doing that. And so it's good they make this change now if they want to make a push into the playoffs, because that's going to be, relying solely on Jalen Hurts I don't think is the long-term answer.
Yeah, so that is the rest of the NFL slate. We go back to Commanders and Rams next. How does this Matthew Stafford-led Rams offense stack up against the Commanders defense that is trying to simplify and succeed? Then we get to our pick 6. Danny Rouillet will join us at 3:30, and then we will get our predictions in before the end of the show as well. That's how our final hour shapes up of the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
Route on a guy and put your hands on somebody and kind of know what they like to do to shed and kind of get a feel for it. And so as you get to know them better and they get to know you, you kind of start playing that advanced like chess metric. And I think the familiarity breeds like a faster game quality, because like I know exactly what this defense is. I know exactly how they're going to play this run. We ran it against them 6 weeks ago. Let's see it again. And we ran it against them last year twice. You know what I'm saying? So you get a really good feel for that. And obviously, like, the fans in the stadium are just a little bit more up. And so I definitely think the divisional thing is real. And you talk about it differently. You talk about divisional games in the week in a different way. So it's definitely something that's 100% real. And, in the context of the Giants, like, for whatever reason, they just have a good feel for this team. They have a good feel, good opportunity. Like, in our Take Fives, we talked about some Giant stories. Like I felt like during early in my playing career, I had a really good feel for what the Giants were doing. Like, I don't know what it was. When I went in that game, I just felt like I knew them really well. And sometimes when the Giants play the Commanders, it's like they just have a good knack and feel for kind of the holes and the wrinkles in the defense and ways to scheme stuff open. So I think divisional games are so fun. They're so fun to watch. They're so fun to play in. And I think they're fun to talk about because, like you said, even in this game where, we're going to talk about the Giants here in a second, Giants aren't a very good football team at the moment. Like, I don't know. And like Santana Moss is this is one of my favorite things he does. He's very consistent with his points of analysis. And anytime we're playing a divisional game, he's like, you can't count the other team out. And I think that's 100% accurate. And so whatever the record is, however bad the Giants have played, like this team, the Commanders, need to come and like put their best foot forward and just say like, we are the better football team, we're the better roster, and play like it. And I think ultimately that's what this game comes down to.
Take Command pregame show, final hour here on the Team 980 and 106.7 The Fan with Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman. Don't forget, we're also streaming live on YouTube, where you can find us after the game. We're doing a live stream tonight after the game, eventually, somewhere deep, late in the night.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know we were doing that.
Yeah, I mean, we do it technically every week, except for when they play it like night.
So this is it.
We're doing it. 4:05. I mean, it's going to be probably like 9 o'clock, but we'll
make it happen.
Do the live stream.
We'll make it
roughly 90 minutes after the game ends. We'll do a live stream tonight. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube at the Team 980 at 106.7 The Fan, or we'll just go bleep this and we'll do one tomorrow. I'm just kidding. We're going to do it tonight because we're professionals.
Yes.
And we can't get up here and talk about how we need guys to show up and be pros and then not be pros ourselves.
Yeah, we got to be pros.
So the pros who will not be showing up today, the injury report, which is brought to you by the Centers for Advanced Orthopedics. More physicians, more locations, more advanced care centered around one thing. You visit CFAortho.com. Brian Robinson is out today with that hamstring injury that we knew on Friday. Julian Good-Jones, backup guard, out. Cole Turner inactive today, which I think is interesting. I'll circle back to him in a second. Mitchell Tinsley, also kind of interesting. James Williams, who's ruled out on Friday, and the new corner, Q Blue Kelly, I believe is how you say his name. Apologies.
I think it's Kai.
Kai Blue Kelly. Apologies to Mr. Kelly.
That was the draft. That was draft when we did that. So maybe it's changed because some pronunciations.
Some guys are like, hey, this is not actually how you pronounce it.
Correct. Yes. Like A-Chain was how everyone was saying his name.
I think it's actually Caillou.
There we go. There we go.
Caillou Blue Kelly.
There we go.
There we go. We got it eventually. Here's my Caillou Blue Kelly fact.
Stanford guy.
Stanford guy from Las Vegas was on my flight to Las Vegas when I went out there this summer.
Just like.
Yeah, I just was like, wait, that's a Combine backpack.
Oh, and then you said what's up?
And then, no, I didn't talk to him.
You like dapped him up? I was like, I'm
no, I just
Hoffman.
was like, oh, because it had like, the Under Armour, or not Under Armour anymore. Noble, and it was like DB number 19. I was like, who's DB number 19 in the Combine?
So it was so funny in the airport, like on the departing flight when I was in Indianapolis for the Combine.
Yeah.
You see every single Combine person like decked out in as much Noble stuff as possible.
Right.
So you're like, I don't know who that is, but that's definitely somebody from a Combine somewhere.
Well, they have to wear it because they probably didn't have room in their suitcase.
Yeah, correct. They get so much stuff,
Yeah, and Noble did a great job last year. But, yeah, so he had the backpack, and I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. We're flying out of BWI to Las Vegas. This guy was drafted by the Ravens, and he's from Las Vegas. So that was Caillou Blue Kelly was on our flight. Anyway, the Cole Turner thing I think is interesting. And we'll
Curtis
get to
Hodges?
So Curtis Hodges went on IR this week.
Oh, okay. All right,
So my question is, like, who's playing tight end for the Commanders this week?
Yeah.
Outside of Logan Thomas and John Bates. I do think Arma is.
So yeah, who's
back.
on IR? Can we review that real quick? Because I feel like
that would have been something that would have been good to look up for in the break. But let me find it real quick.
So sorry, but because like this is the time of year where everybody's getting moved to IR because they're trying to get a look at guys for next year, trying to get a look at futures contracts, all that kind of stuff. So it's always interesting. I think this time of year to see who's up, who's down, and any significant names like that.
So on the tight end spot, yeah, you're looking at Alex Arma back in the lineup, which is great. I love to see him back, and I think that is a huge deal for their offense. But I guess what this tells you is they've seen enough of Cole Turner. Yeah. Like, when you talk about young guys that you want to see, like, they've clearly seen enough that they're just like, nah, dude, you're a healthy scratch. Like, we're good on you.
Yeah. And, it's just also, like, he's in that weird third tight end spot where there is a need for that position, but also, like, Alex Arma's the third tight end, and you're kind of interchangeable. So, like, maybe they want to carry an extra linebacker. Maybe it's a one-to-one with Alex Arma. So I do think it is I don't know if there's too much to read into that, because he is the third guy in that room.
They did bring up Jonathan Williams, so the sub 3 backs today, so that is something that is worth noting as well. But as they look at young guys, Tinsley still not being – I don't know who you would put down. I think that's the problem there is, like, Jameson's your punt returner. Would you be like, hey, Diami, sorry, you get a week off. Byron Pringle, like, no, those guys have earned the right to continue to play. So there's just not really a spot for Mitchell Tinsley. And then, obviously, Julian Good-Jones down with Sadiq Charles coming back. Ricky Stromberg to IR in the last couple of weeks as well, probably worth mentioning. And then, on the defensive side of the ball, one guy that I know has been mentioned they want to get a look at, and this is probably why Kelly is down, is Tariq Castro-Fields, who's been excellent on special teams, but can he play some corner? And they made that move to sign Caillou Blue Kelly and release Danny Johnson, who's been a great soldier for this team and has played a lot of good football, played some bad football, but as a backup has always been reliable the last couple of years. And it's just that time of year. And I think it's weird because there's not a lot of places on this roster where there is a lot of flexibility.
Right. I think that's exactly right. And this is the time of year where you got to figure out, like, what's the vision moving forward for the team? Who's going to be a part of the vision? Obviously, you know, like you said, Danny Johnson's been a guy who's been a lot of fun to watch. Like, I've really enjoyed his journey. Not always the most consistent guy, but, you know, he's been here, he's fought. I understand. I really empathize and relate to that position. But this is when you're in that spot, that kind of flex spot on the roster, they're going to look for somebody better. And maybe they feel it's Caillou Blue Kelly, because I know my evaluation on him was pretty good coming out. So it's nice to have a player who I think could be a like a starting quarter in the NFL, kind of as your guy.
Great pickup, for sure.
And if you think Danny Johnson's not that guy, like, this is a move you got to make. And you mentioned the Tariq Castro-Fields move, because, like, they brought him in last year. Can he fill this role out for you? And he struggled a little bit in the preseason, but you know, maybe he's looked better in practice. Maybe the simplified defense is going to speak to him. So. Again, this is the time of year. You know, Jabril Cox, is he going to play? Like, what's his role today?
That's the position I want to look at real quick as we take a look at this Commanders defense today is, with Jamin Davis out, like, what do you do? Because, like, Jahan Harris would have been nice, but he's on IR. So you're really down to Barton, Mayo, and Jabril Cox. And, like, David Mayo, you know what he is. What is the point of putting him out there? I mean, you obviously have to play the guys. There's a meritocracy element. If Mayo's earned it, he's earned it.
I think it's Khaleke Hudson, right? It'll be Khaleke Hudson and.
Well, that I think is a great question. Is like, can Khaleke play every down? In the spot that Jamin used to play every down.
Yeah, I don't know. But this is, again, kind of to your Tariq Castro-Fields point. I think this is definitely an opportunity to see. Like, I think he's flashed at times this year. I think a lot of fans have been really excited about what he's shown from a flash standpoint, but also he isn't leveraged the same way Jamin's been leveraged in those games. So, and when he has been leveraged, he's struggled. I think back to the Atlanta game when Jamin does a good job fighting through the pick and getting a tackle for a 1-yard gain on a little swing pass to Bijan. And then they run the same play when Khaleek's in there. It ends up being a 15 or 20-yard, almost an explosive play. So, again, how does he handle a larger role? Does he deserve to be a part of the roster moving forward? Like, everyone says these games aren't important, but these two guys, like, this is your audition.
I mean, for Castro-Fields, like, you might have a game or two, and then they're going to swap you out with Caillou Blue Kelly.
Correct.
And be like, okay, or do they? You know, they could always give Kendall a hamstring injury.
Yeah.
Like, hey, buddy, sorry, your hip's really bothering you. We're going to put you on IR. Which I think those types of moves probably coming as well. There's some pass rushers that I think they're a little interested in. As well, so we'll see. Jalen Harris is a guy that kind of they sneakily sign under the radar. And all of a sudden, you're like, "Who's Jalen Harris? And why is he playing 15 snaps a game?" But he's another guy they're definitely looking at as well. Real quick on the Rams' offense side of it, in an effort to actually preview this particular game, not just the bigger picture stuff. Like, what is it that is the biggest challenge today with the Sean McVay offense? And then how do you try to use this new simplified scheme to stop it?
I mean, there's a bunch of challenges to the Sean McVay offense. I think maybe the kind of highest level one, the
tie that binds it all together,
is the fact that they do everything out of 11. So what they're trying to do, 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back, is if you watch the Baltimore game, they came out and ran like 10 consecutive runs, all out of 11. They didn't have 2 tight ends on the field one time, maybe one time. But the idea is that if we can run the ball out of this personnel grouping, you're going to have to match in a heavier personnel grouping, and then we're in 11, and you're in a lot of trouble. Right. So that's
you don't have the DBs on the field to match our wide receivers.
Correct.
And now we throw.
And I think we've seen how – so that's the highest level, I think. And then obviously what Matthew Stafford does on a down-to-down basis is just – it's spectacular. I mean, he's playing – I think his production's not quite been, high-level elite production in terms of statistics, in terms of touchdowns, yards, all that kind of thing. But when you look at him from an EPA per play standpoint, from a big-time throw standpoint, I mean, it's the top of the top. And so you're going to see a lot of that today. So Matthew Stafford, 11 personnel, how do you handle those two things if you're Ron? But I do think playing a simplified coverage structure helps with that. You can disguise better for a guy in Matthew Stafford at the line of scrimmage who's trying to check into some different stuff. You can you don't have to worry about switching personnels out so much because you trust that the interchangeable pieces know the defense because there's not as much information in. So I think there are a lot of benefits to kind of what Ron's done in terms of simplifying, and hopefully see the benefits of that today.
Ready for a quasi-hot take?
Yeah, I'm always ready for a quasi.
I think Matthew Stafford might be the quasi-hot take. The hot take version would be Matthew Stafford is the most underrated player in the last 15 years of the NFL. I think he's safely one of the 5 most underrated players. Like, he had 5,000-yard seasons in Detroit where he led an offense that scored like mid-20s points per game, and their defenses were so bad that he didn't even sniff the playoffs. So I just think that guy's so good. Like, he was the number 1 overall pick for a reason, and it was a justified pick. He's just a dumpster fire in Detroit for so long. And in a way, it's sad that, like, it took him leaving for them to figure it out up there. They got the right coach, the right OC, the right everything. And part of that was the talent they got in the trade for Stafford. But Stafford was incredible and obviously has continued to prove that in L.A. All right, when we get back, it's Logan's favorite segment. We take the pick 6 that Anthony Haney, my producer on the Hoffman Show, and I picked on our Friday edition of that radio program, and we run by Logan the 6 most interesting guys to watch coming up about an hour from right now against the Rams for the Commanders. It's the Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day.
Put your hands on somebody, advanced like chess metric. And I think the familiarity breeds like a faster game quality because like I know exactly what this defense is. I know exactly how they're going to play this run. We ran it against them, 6 weeks ago. Let's see it again. And we ran it against them last year twice. You know what I'm saying? So you get a really good feel for that. And obviously like the fans in the stadium are just a little bit more up. And so I definitely think the divisional thing is real. And you talk about it differently. You talk about divisional games in the week in a different way. So it's definitely something that's 100% real. And, in the context of the Giants, like for whatever reason, they just have a good feel for this team. They have a good feel, good opportunity. Like, in our Take 5s, we talked about some Giant stories. Like I felt like during early in my playing career, I had a really good feel for what the Giants were doing. Like, I don't know what it was. When I went in that game, I just felt like I knew them really well. And sometimes when the Giants play the Commanders, it's like they just have a good knack and feel for kind of the holes and the wrinkles in the defense and ways to scheme stuff open. So I think divisional games are so fun. They're so fun to watch. They're so fun to play in. And I think they're fun to talk about because, like you said, even in this game where, we're going to talk about the Giants here in a second, Giants aren't a very good football team at the moment. Like, I don't know. And like Santana Moss is this is one of my favorite things he does. He's very consistent with his points of analysis. And anytime we're playing a divisional game, he's like, you can't count the other team out. And I think that's 100% accurate. And so whatever the record is, however bad the Giants have played, like this team, the Commanders, need to come and like put their best foot forward and just say like, we are the better football team. We're the better roster and play like it. And I think ultimately that's what this game comes down to.
Take Command pregame show on a Burgundy and Gold game day live from Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor with Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman, and on the Hoffman Show, which we do daily, 4 to 7 on the Team 980 on Fridays, we do a segment we call the Pick Six. We pick the 6 players who we think will have the biggest impact for the Commanders on the game on Sunday. We review it Mondays at 6, and in between, we run it by Logan here on the Take Command pregame show. My producer, Anthony Haney, and I alternate picks. I let Anthony go first this week, Logan, and he went with Sadiq Charles / Chris Paul. This was not long after Ron Rivera, of course, had announced that Sadiq Charles was back and was going to play in some level of rotation. The Aaron Donald effect also in play here. This is probably also what I would have done with my first pick. Seems pretty obvious that it's very important. No, it's extremely important, and I love this pick, from Anthony. And, last week I was giving Anthony a hard time. This is excellent. Hey, don't worry, he has more picks. In terms of a matchup that's probably most significant to the outcome, it's this one, right? Because that's where Aaron Donald lines up traditionally, and the other thing about him is you can move him around, and he's going to draw the fish. The best matchup for him, and. For Chris Paul, he's struggled the last couple of weeks in pass protection. Obviously very, very talented, but not producing from a pass protection standpoint. And Sadiq Charles hasn't played football. So what is the plan to help those guys out versus Aaron Donald? Because that matchup by itself could single-handedly wreck this game. Yeah, there's the phrase getting up to speed, and then there's whatever speed Aaron Donald plays at. So that is a tough ask. My first pick was Emmanuel Forbes. His first game back in a couple of weeks after the injury, and with obviously this new reconfigured defense, plus Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, these are receivers that are, I think, a great challenge for Forbes because they really do test your technique and your discipline. These aren't physical freak type of guys. They are precise. They understand leverage, they understand timing. And if you're not on top of exactly what you need to be doing, there is no such thing as makeup speed against them because they know how to break at the exact right time and make themselves available. And some of the gifts that I think Emmanuel Forbes relies on at times aren't as applicable to a receiver like a Puka Nacua or like a Cooper Kupp. Well, I do think that his speed, for example, it helps a lot in this matchup. And what I mean by that is you're going to get a lot of short area moves. You got to get a lot of route savvy kind of from Kupp and Nacua. When you watch them, it's really fun to watch them from a pure receiver standpoint. But one of the things I think when you watch Forbes, he's done well against guys who can't run away from him. And there's not a lot of guys in the NFL who can run away from him, but there are a couple. And I don't think either one of these guys can do that. So I do think that, he can be a little bit more patient, right? There's not this fear that they're going to beat you deep, right? I can be a little bit more patient. I don't have to bite on the stutter. Don't have to bite on the double stick. Don't have to bite on the stem. I can trust my speed, trust my positioning, and then make a play when I have to. So hopefully this is a good matchup for him. And again, I thought he was playing a little bit better, especially in that New England game before the injury. So I'm excited to see him on the field a little bit more, and if he can make the impact that we all thought he would make, being the first pick for this team. Would make you feel a lot better if he can have a great Final Four games here going into the offseason. Number 3, Anthony's second pick, Eric Bieniemy, because he loves to pick the coordinator, and then I love to see whether you are come on, man, or whether it's just a lazy pick by young Haney. I mean, it is kind of a lazy pick. I mean, the coordinator is maybe the coordinators are maybe the most important people. Right, we say it every week, but some weeks they have an out, it's oh God, they don't have a chance if whatever. And I don't feel like this is a week where offensive schematic play calling wise, it's it's just the normal enormous impact on the game. Yeah, and I think this week, again, we talked about this at the top of the show, is just EB's ability to kind of change what he feels comfortable from a protection standpoint, make sure Aaron Donald doesn't affect the game, maximize what Sam Howell is doing in the passing game. And after 2 weeks, really 1 week against Miami where the offense did not look very good, what does it look like coming off the bye? Have you changed your process? Have you changed your point of emphasis? And so I do think this is a big game for Eric Bieniemy. And maybe it's not schematically the most impactful game of all time, but I do think the protection stuff is key. Protection's coming off the bye. What does this offense look like? We watched in our film breakdown this week so much of, the details don't seem like they're right. The splits, the speed, the creating horizontal stretch, that wasn't there the way I thought it would be. And
can you get it right this week? And can the offense look like it did earlier in the season? And I think this team, while a good football team in the LA Rams, they're not defensively the juggernauts you've seen the last couple of weeks. So can you maximize what you're doing? And so I do think it is a good test for EB to see kind of where he's at and where this offense is at.
No doubt. That would include some contributions from number 1, Jahan Dotson, number 4 on our list, my second pick. And we talked about this more extensively earlier in the show. In the interest of time, won't do too much recapping. But basically, he's the guy that gets caught up in the wash in terms of the discussion. First rounder last year. How good Jahan Dotson is and what kind of season he has to finish out here, I think is critically important in terms of the future of this team and really feeling like, oh, we need to upgrade the receiver room, or like, no, it's just kind of a weird, bad year.
Yeah.
This deep into the season, coming off the bye, all the pressure on, like, and not to mention in the evaluation of Sam Howell, Jahan playing better can help Sam play better. And so it seems fairly obvious on that one. Last 2, Quan Martin was Anthony's final pick.
Quan Martin, I think, is an excellent pick. I really want to see what Quan Martin's doing, especially being with Jamin out. Like, are you in that Buffalo nickel a little bit more?
And that was his reasoning.
Yeah, and I think it's excellent. I think he struggled a little bit against Miami, but he was kind of put in these situations where he's approximately doing the right thing, but not quite. And I think you just see a little bit of his youth, but you see the athleticism, you see the work, you see the physicality, and he's a guy that, while like his PFF grade's probably not great this week, or from when they played Miami, I think he's a guy that seems to be taking the right steps. And the more I watch him, the more like, okay, all right, here it is. And so this would be a good statement game for him, I think, because he's getting a lot of opportunity as well.
I think it's going to be interesting, too, to see how Ron uses him. Like, hey, can we not get him ISO'd against Tyreek Hill in the slot?
Yeah.
Can you get him in positions that are more likely to see him succeed? I think that is kind of what you're looking at for Quan. And then my last pick was Chris Rodriguez. Brian Robinson is out today.
Right.
So what kind of workload does he have, and what does this offense look like with him as a lead back? I would imagine Gibson probably gets a little bit more in terms of the run game than you would anticipate if Robinson was healthy. But I think that the substitute, like the guy that's going to start the game is RB1, if you will, is Chris Rodriguez. And he's been, I think, their best runner of the football this season as a pure runner.
Yeah.
And so what does it look like with him out there, and how often does EB lean on that run game today?
Yeah, I really, really like this pick. And again, he's just a guy who's shown an ability each and every time he touches the football when he's holding on to it. Obviously, the fumble was a big issue versus Miami. But he just maximizes the offensive line. Like, I played with a guy named Jordan Young when I was in Chicago, who was not the biggest, not the strongest, not the fastest back, but elevated every single blocker in the blocking surface because of his vision and because of how he ran the run. And I think when you look at Chris Rodriguez, he has the ability to do that. And in a game like this where, while we've talked about how awesome the Seattle offense is and what they bring to the table, they don't score a lot of points. So this is going to allow the running backs, I think, to get a little bit more involved, possess the football a little bit, and hopefully they can lean on that skill set that Chris Rodriguez brings.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Desmond Ridder in Charlotte for Atlanta just threw one of the worst picks you'll ever see in your life. Threw it right back across his body, which is a big no-no, and threw it directly to the wrong team. Also not recommended. So we'll get you a quick update before we go on some of these games. But next, Danny Rouillet will join us from Grant and Danny. His thoughts on today and kind of the way the rest of the season shapes up. It is the Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day.
We have a new submission to the Real Things Hall of Fame. The F-35 is a fighter jet that the military has. It is very expensive. Very expensive. The F-35 program costs the U.S. government / the military over $1 trillion. Like, this is one of the most expensive things in the U.S. government's budget is the program that makes these planes. Each one is incredibly valuable and expensive. And something happened during a training mission, but this jet leaves, they go on a training mission, and it's in stealth mode, apparently, and the pilot has to eject. So the pilot's like, I'm up out of here. Pilot lands relatively safely, has, I think, an injury or two that has to be tended to, but, like, is alive. But then they lost the jet. So the jet disappeared from the radar. The U.S. government's like, well, we don't know where the jet is. And so the Buford, which is the suburb not suburb, it's in South Carolina. It's by Charleston. Close enough. If people are actually from there and don't want to say that and want to say it's by Hilton Head, I know I grew up in the state. Leave my geography alone for the sake of the story, which I've now made less efficient by telling you all of those things because I can't help myself. Talk about a plane crash. Hey, we're back. So the F-35 gets essentially lost, and they're like, I don't know where this very expensive warplane went. And lo and behold, sometime the next day or later that day, it crashes somewhere, and luckily no one's hurt. But this $100 million plane is gone. Whoopsies. We crashed the plane. And this is an eyewitness account from a Charleston area television station of someone who heard the crash.
In the bathroom taking a shave, and I heard a screeching, between a screech and a whistle. I said, what in the world is this? And I heard a boom. Then my whole house shook.
White says he didn't realize it was a plane at the time, so he didn't call anybody.
The first thought came to me, I said, what's it, a meteorite coming out of space or something? And I said, well, if the airplane, it needed to be reported, but the thing was flying is too low.
The F-35B airplane wreckage created an extensive debris field.
That voice, we gotta get a drop for the voice because it might be better than Steph Curry's.
I was gonna say, I feel like we have to do a comparison. Can I pull this off with? Yeah, okay. So I had to compare or see if I had enough channels on the board to do this. But we got Steph Curry here. We got Charlie Brown here. And we got our mans here.
His is better, though.
I think his is the best one. His is definitely, it's not quite Charlie Brown. It's definitely close to Steph Curry, though.
Yes.
We'll see you tomorrow. Take Command pregame show on a burgundy and gold game day. Craig Hoffman here, Logan Paulsen there. We got a half an hour to go before the Commanders take on the Rams at the top of the hour. And it's our pleasure to welcome to the show Danny Rouillet, co-host of Grant and Danny 106.7 The Fan weekday afternoons. Danny, how is your Sunday so far?
We are doing all right, boys. Hanging out in the indoors because that is my want on a Sunday. Plus, the weather is inclement, which is the excuse.
Yeah, it looks terrible, almost as bad as it does in Charlotte. And yes, I am talking about the weather, not the football. But hopefully, that's both terrible in that Falcons-Panthers game. I want to circle back to start with you, Danny, to a place that we started the show, and Logan and I were actually just talking about this in the break as well, which is we expect changes in the offseason. The Chargers just made their firing, and now watching Chicago play, it's like I don't even know if that job's going to be available if the Bears keep playing, especially defense like this. But let's say those three jobs are available, and if you want to throw any other names that you think are worth mentioning, by all means, go ahead. How do you rank this Washington job for potential GMs and especially potential head coaches?
It's highly. If it's not one, which I'll come back to in a second, I think it's probably number two. Biggest reason why, you're going to have a pretty high pick and then a couple others that they've recruited now within the top 45, 40, 50 or so in terms of their own second-round value that they got there from Montez Sweat, et cetera. But to me, the biggest deal, it's almost like a blank slate in terms of salary cap allocation, right? And they're going to have $80+ $90 million in cap space. That's a pretty appealing thing for a general manager to come in and be able to have some success quickly if you're shrewd about it, if you're good in terms of signing the right free agents, extending some of your own guys, figuring out who fits, et cetera. That makes it a pretty appealing thing. The reason the Chargers' job is number one, in addition to a lot of talent, and they do have a lot of talent in a number of key spots, right? Whether it's wide receiver, offensive skill guys, people like Derwin James, Joey Bosa, et cetera, you've got the quarterback. When you draft a player in the top 5, top 10, top 15, you're hoping to find a Justin Herbert. I know he's now, the old school hat on a hat Oklahoma drill football community's favorite punchline because they haven't won a ton with him at quarterback. I'll take my chances with a guy that's that good, please and thank you, that I saw go for 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns for a team that, recently just fired their head coach, which he did a couple of seasons ago. Because you have that quarterback position solved, they're in salary cap hell, too, by the way. They got a lot of work to do in that regard, but they've got Justin Herbert. I mean, that makes it so appealing. So that's my number one job, but to me, it's right there. I have the beholder between Washington and maybe even Chicago potentially, if that is the destination. Because, A, they're going to get the first pick, probably then pick again in the top 10. But you touched on it, Craig. The way they're playing football, all of a sudden, it's like, are they really going to make some big changes? I still think they should, but now it's more up in the air.
Obviously, the other big topic that we're talking about today is related to that team rebuilding, but it's the who do you want to see question. Howell's the obvious. Anybody non-Howell that you are particularly interested in over the final quarter of the season?
There are a handful of guys, but to me, Jahan Dotson is the biggest. This is somebody, guys, I don't know where you were on it. I can't remember, Logan, if we talked about this, but before the season, I had one of those, let me make my sneaky, bold prediction type bet, right? I argued that Jahan Dotson was going to lead the team in catches. Maybe not yards, because McLaurin's a bit more explosive, maybe yards after the catch, but I thought Dotson would be working some of those underneath routes. I thought he'd be a volume guy, and it just hasn't been there consistently for whatever reason. And I get smarter people than me could tell you why, whether it's scheming, design, Dotson being hampered by something, maybe a bad fit. I don't know what I don't know there, but I've been really disappointed and underwhelmed at his season. So to me, these last handful of weeks, I'm going, was I wrong about his rookie year when he was healthy and they started targeting him an awful lot, especially down the stretch for a team that still had designs of making the playoffs at that point? Was I incorrect in my evaluation, or is this just kind of a weird year? I really want to see what he's all about kind of down the stretch. And then, looking kind of around the roster, I want to know about Chris Rodriguez. I want to know if that could be your number 2 guy, or maybe even a number 1 guy in certain spots and sections. I want to know about some guys on this offensive line, the Sadiq Charles or Chris Paul, or what they have. Obviously, we can't see Ricky Stromberg because he's injured, but some of those young players kind of finishing strong down the stretch on the offensive side.
Anybody on the defensive side of the ball you're taking a look at there?
Yeah, I mean, I really want to see Emmanuel Forbes. Again, this is now that they're down and out pretty much. I want to see, is this maybe a rough start to a career, or is this a can't play kind of start to the career? So I'm obviously curious about him. I want to see St. Juice finish strong, kind of in a flurry there. And, to me, Daron Payne is an interesting one as well, guys. I argued last year that as he had the breakout, right, instead of just kind of a contract year motivation, I thought this was kind of a graduation for him as a disruptor, as a pass rusher, as someone that could really take over games. You saw it in very brief spots at times. Remember that, this is going forever ago. Remember that drive against Denver when there were 3 plays? Daron Payne made all of them, and the series was over. You're going, oh, my God, this guy's going to have a monster year, and it never really materialized. I'd love to see him finish strong in that regard. But those are a couple of names that come to mind.
So you just mentioned a ton of names that we've actually talked about throughout whether it's this week on the podcast, I've talked about them on the radio, or that we've talked about today on the show. Like, you actually hit a ton. I was like, is Danny doing a bit on us where he just listened to the whole show and then is regurgitating our own information?
It's like taking a class for a professor and saying their own words back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of just did that bit. Unknowingly, or you're good at bits, which is definitely a possibility. The question I would like to ask you, though, is what if it doesn't happen, right? This is a possibility that we all go through, we want this guy to do well. And it's okay, well, if he does, then great. And we never really go down the other road. So let me take a guy like Daron Payne. If he doesn't have a strong close to the season, I'll throw John Allen in as well. How does that change how you look at next year for this team?
Well, listen, and I did this too, by the way, when Ron first took over. If you remember going back to that point, they had an incumbent quarterback in Dwayne Haskins, right? Rest in peace. And it was a decision right around number 2. And what we basically said was, I mean, I know what I said for myself. I don't want to speak for Grant, but I said, here's what I would do. I would, after Haskins had a nice strong finish to the 2019 season, I believe it was. I said, hey, I'm curious. I want to see more. I'd like to see more of this kid. So what I would do is I would trade back in the draft and, pick up a lineman and a receiver, and, that would be my strategy. But if they come in and go no to Haskins, I want, at the time it would have been Tua, right? I said, by all means, this is your show here. This is what you're running. So all that with a caveat to basically say, a new GM, presumably, right, who walks in here and goes, you know what, I don't want to run this scheme or design where Daron Payne's an anchor. I want someone that's more X. Fine, right? We can move on. We could take 10 cents on the dollar just to sort of be able to move laterally and fill him maybe with somebody more appropriate. If we don't want defensive linemen having that kind of salary allocation for our cap going forward, we can make a move. If it's no, that guy's a stud, he's just not being used right, here's what we can do, then we can re-up. At this point, they're going to have cap flexibility and maybe a little bit of time and some grace that I think this fan base is actually going to give them for the first time in a long, long time, where we've been patient for so long, to basically say, hey, wait a minute, we actually have a plan now. There actually is a build in mind. Here's where we're going and how we get there. So I'm even willing to wait a year on Daron Payne with a whole new staff, whole new set of front office folks, general manager, down to the coaches staff, down to position coaches, to see if we can get back to this past year for how good Payne was.
Yeah, absolutely. So for today's game, who you got?
Rams by 1,000,000. I'm only being sort of sarcastic. Guys, here's my real feeling in all sincerity. It feels like this Washington team, maybe not quite, now I know the bye week just happened, so maybe it's a different animal, but it feels Chargery to me. But these last couple of efforts where they weren't really competitive, losing 90-15 or whatever, 90-25, over these last couple, it has sort of felt like, we're just playing out the string, and it just sort of feels like guys are trying to maybe do just enough to look decent enough on the film to secure their position, whether it's here or somewhere else for next year. Rams are playing good football. That's the other part about it. I know they lost this past week to Baltimore, but they were really impressive against one of the best teams in the NFL on the road. Kind of come in red hot, playing pretty good football. And defensively, they're pretty solid. Offensively, I don't know how this group stops 2 basically caliber number 1 wide receivers. So I do think the Rams win this game by double digits. But yeah, I mean, I'm now in, not fake Mike Shanahan evaluation mode. Remember that one, Logan, when he was evaluating?
Yes.
I'm actually in evaluation mode. I actually want to see Howell and Jahan Dotson and some of these young guys play against the team that's got something to play for.
That is Danny Rouillet. You can listen to him tomorrow, 2 to 6:30 on 106.7 The Fan with Grant Paulsen. Danny, I'll see you there back at the shop. Enjoy the rest of your weekend indoors.
Thank you, boys. Appreciate you.
All right, Danny Rouillet again with us here on the Take Command pregame show. Denton Day joins us from our D.C. studios when we get back, wrapping up the show here from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor. Predictions and game changers next. Wrapping up live from Tap Sports Bar at MGM National Harbor with Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman. If you're watching us on YouTube, you now see the truth, which is that Logan is very tall, and I'm not as tall as Logan. I'm not that short. I just feel the need to say that every time.
How tall are you? 6 foot?
I'm 6 feet tall. You're 6'5".
I am a big guy, yeah.
Logan's been sitting in a chair that was wound down the entire show. We've decided to stand for the final segment, and thus
Back's getting a little tight.
Yeah, the chairs are very comfortable unless you have to sit in them for 3.5 hours, and gets a little not as fun.
Not as comfy.
So around the NFL, real quick, Montez Sweat is having a monster game for the Bears against the Browns. Bears up 17-10. Sweat, we think, has 3 sacks. We can double check that, or just believe us that he's got at least 2.5.
And a bunch of pressures.
He's been awesome for them, and Bears continuing to play at an all top defensive level. Meanwhile, in Carolina, the Panthers just beat the Falcons. Carolina got the ball down to the 1 yard line with about 90 seconds to go. Took a knee twice. Then with 1 second to go, lined up, kicked the game-winning field goal. Meanwhile, in Kansas City up on New England by 10. Been a weird game, frustrating one, but luckily for Kansas City, New England's offense isn't very good. So they've been able to maintain a little bit of separation. Tampa up 34-20 on Green Bay. Jets still getting shut out. Deep into the third quarter, they had 5 yards of total offense. Zach Wilson out of this one with a head injury, although not a concussion, whatever that means. Miami up 30-0 there. So that's kind of what's going on around the league. Also, I guess the best game remaining on the schedule with 97 seconds to go. Tennessee and Houston. Houston driving. That game is tied at 16. Houston either just got into or is on the verge of getting into field goal range. So I'll let you know when that one goes final. All right. We bring in now our buddy Denton Day, who's, of course, host of Burgundy and Gold Game Day Live, coming up to take you through Rams and Commanders. Denton, how are you, sir?
Fellas, how we doing? Hope everyone's well.
We are doing well. Are you sitting or standing?
I am sitting. I'm glad I'm not standing with you guys. That would be very tough on the camera. You guys are tall. I am not. And pardon the dated reference, but we look like singular the way we raised that bar if I was with you.
Singular?
That's a reference. It's lost on both of us.
Is that a song?
The old television company, Singular Raising the Bar. It's a short bar, a medium-sized bar, and a tall bar. That's what we would look like.
Who knew that the youngest guy amongst us would get us with the old reference that we're just lost on? All right, let's talk about football because we'll sound smarter because I don't think Logan and I at least could have possibly just sounded dumber or sounded dumber. Let's go to our difference makers of the game. Presented by Zips Cleaners. Zips Cleaners knows that looking good makes all the difference, whether on the field, on the job, or wherever life takes you. At just $3.29 or less per garment, we make it easy and affordable to look your best. Find a Zips near you at zipscleaners.com. Denton will take a difference maker of the game for the Commanders for you.
Are we pretty much all in agreement that Sam Howell's off the table with this one? Like, we all want to see Sam Howell play well.
Yeah. From that standpoint, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll take Sam Howell out of this. I think the offense is where I would be looking. With Brian Robinson not in, I am excited to see what Chris Rodriguez is going to look like with a little bit more action. It felt like for the first 2/3 of the season, every time he came in, it was like a design run. Hey, we're going to run Chris Rodriguez, so it kind of became a little bit of a tell. I'm excited to see what they can do with him and utilize him a little bit more frequently today, so I'm looking forward to see what 2-3 can do.
I like that.
I like that one quite a bit. I want to go Quan Martin. I don't know. I just want to see him kind of with Jamin Davis being out. Excuse me. I think that Buffalo nickel role is going to be huge. We talked about Khalil Hudson and how he's going to have a larger role. You don't want him playing the whole time necessarily. If he does, Major Tutty's here. What's up?
Major Tutty is here.
Knuckles.
What's up, Major Tutty? Okay, good. I thought I was about to get left hanging by Major Tutty.
That would have been a bad look.
That would have been more embarrassing than whatever the hell happened to start this segment.
Raising the bar.
Yeah.
So I do think that Quan Martin would kind of alleviate some of those snaps, but also, like we talked about, I think he's doing a good job, and I want to see him do more. And I know he has given up some big plays, but I think he's trending in the right direction. I think this would be a good game to kind of say, hey, I deserve to be the starting nickel, starting Buffalo nickel, whatever it is, moving into the last 4 games of the season, and I think he's going to have a huge impact on the game.
I'm going to go with the guy drafted around ahead of him. I'm going to go with Forbes.
Oh, look at you.
I think Matthew Stafford is the type of quarterback that will throw you an opportunity or two.
Sure.
Now, he also can make it look like he's throwing you an opportunity, and he knows he can get that ball 1 inch above your reach. Like, he is that damn good. But I do think there's an opportunity potentially for Forbes to get a pick today. He's going to get targeted, so how does he handle it? Talk about a difference maker. Do you make the plays or not? If you make them, the Commanders have a chance. If not, could be another very lopsided score. That's our difference maker of the game, presented by Zips Cleaners, which leaves predictions, boys. Predictions. Denton, Kevin said, as you well know, of course, Denton, on top of hosting with us on the weekends, is the producer daily of the Kevin Sheehan Show. So you know that Sheehan gave them out to cover. Danny thinks they're going to get blown out. Those are the predictions that we have so far. Junkie's also predicting blowouts. What you got?
Well, I can see that we are so confident because we used to do a stat that would take place if we know they were going to win, and we've just completely bypassed that.
Some of that is some time management that I'm doing here, but that's true. If you have a stat and you were really ready for that, we're happy to take yours.
No, I got nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just making a little joke there.
Okay.
I think 38-20 is going to be the score here. I just don't know if this defense can stop anybody. And
you said
I think
38-20?
Yeah, 38-20. I think the Rams are playing really good football. Last week's game was a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, they lose it to Baltimore, but I think their offense is starting to kind of click a little bit, and I think this is going to be a kind of a get-right game for them. So 38-20, I think the Rams get it done.
Oof.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in that same boat. I don't know. For some reason, I think they're going to win this game.
You do this every week.
I know. I talk myself into it every week, but I haven't predicted them winning in a while.
Yeah, you've talked yourself back out of it correctly.
Yes.
The last couple.
But it is a Commanders show, so
yeah,
I'm going to say they win, 30-28. They win the game.
Wow. Okay,
Wow.
Logan going way out on a limb.
Yeah.
I am not willing to go that far on the limb, but I'll at least live on the tree that you and Kevin are off of, where it's closer than blowout territory.
Yeah, I think so too.
Now at 9.5, that does leave some space to still lose pretty heftily. And have the score not be pretty. But, I think that this is a week where Sam Howell can hit a big play or two, where you can score some points. Maybe they get back up to that kind of 24-point range.
Which would be great.
I don't think that this defense is stopping anyone. Let's go like backdoor cover late, 31-24 type of situation.
I actually like that quite a bit.
Yeah, so not a blowout, not a game where they're killing it. And they're competitive for a half.
Let's talk about stats real quick. You mentioned stats. They're the third worst team in the NFL at giving up explosive passes. So there is an opportunity in this game for explosive plays. They go through offensive doldrums. Like, there is a world where, the offense comes out hot, hit a couple.
You're talking about the Rams are third worst.
Yes, obviously.
Commanders are first worst.
Yes.
Commanders are very
so, guys,
bad.
everyone just, pump the brakes. But that is a statistic that is relevant to this. And when you watch that Baltimore game, a lot, every explosive play was on a coverage bust. So can we manufacture those? And I think Sam Howell has shown an ability to find those. And if the defense can make one or two stops, you never know what's going to happen. I think that's why I feel semi-confident is the back-end defense is definitely not as good as the past couple weeks. And Sam versus average defenses in the back end has played much better. So I'm hoping for a Sam Howell resurgence and more points than they've shown the last couple of weeks.
Would love that. Would also love some pressure on Matthew Stafford.
That'd be great.
That's something that I'm looking.
That would be fantastic
to generate today. Well, I'm
would
looking
you like
to see
that,
if it's
Craig?
generated.
Would you like that, Denton? That'd be great. Some sacks, some pressures. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I love it. Let's see some competitive football because we have not gotten
Sweat
that
just
recently. Or we'll just go watch Montez Sweat highlights and be sad. Denton Day got you covered next. Burgundy and Gold Game Day Live getting going. I'll see y'all tomorrow on the radio for the Hoffman Show. Logan and I will see you about 90 minutes after the final whistle tonight on YouTube for the Take Command post-game show. For our engineer, Tim Parker, for Logan, I am Craig. And we'll see you back here at Tap Sports Bar next week at 10 a.m. for another edition of the Take Command pregame show. Enjoy the game, everybody.